Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Shadow and Sun Show. Sorry about the little snafu in the beginning. Situation normal. All, anyways. Welcome back to the Appendix N Book Club. Uh, this season, if you will, we are doing things a little bit differently. We're going to go and hit uh, as in me and my friends, all the books that we think were mysteriously or whatever absent from any of the other appendix and book lists we've seen. I checked the one that Bo sent me. Uh, Gilgamesh was not on it. While they did talk about Gilgamesh here in the Deities and Demigods book, I think. As a matter of fact, no, no Gilgamesh here, but Enlil and Enki and Inanna and Ki and Inanna Sin, etc. Let's go look and see if maybe they were under the Babylonian myth. Here we go. Gilgamesh. Okay. Which is weird because Enlil and Enki and some of the other ones I know were mentioned in Gilgamesh, reading it, listening to the audiobook. I forgot to post it, but I will. You guys can find it anywhere. It was a nice audio book. It was like 2 hours, but um, I'm sure you can find one of your own elsewhere. That sort of thing. There's plenty. What's up, Stephen? I'm going to real quick just read what was it. Who wrote the encyclopedia? James Ward and Robert Kuntz, uh, edited by Lawrence Schick. But I'm going to go read what it says here in the Deities and Demigods. Good Friday morning. You're a little ahead of me, fellow time traveler. The hero of legend was the warrior, necromancer, high priest, ruler of his land. I don't know where they're getting any of that. Uh, He is noted for going out and getting things done when others were unable. While his +2 mace is able to hit with brutal force for 2 to 20 points of damage, Gilgamesh loves to attack by wrestling, and stories abound of him wrestling a mighty bull or god of destruction. Gilgamesh was a great king noted for his tyrannical rule. Although he governs well and maintains peace, he uses his authority to satisfy his personal pleasures. He is a great lover of all types of earthly pleasure. He is stubborn and prefers the direct method for solving problems whenever possible. He is a great wrestler, using this attack mode in preference to all others. Gilgamesh has a great fear of death. If he learns of any way to avoid death, he will do whatever is required to gain it. One oddity, however, is that his fear of death seldom occurs to him when facing a terrible foe. At such times, his courage will hearten him, and he will fight without wavering. What? Okay, let's just go down the deities and demigods. Armor class 6. Okay, whatever. 180 hit points, 2 attacks for 2 to 20 plus 8. He was neutral good, magic resistance 10%. Why bother? 5th level cleric druid, 12th level ranger, 10th level magic user, 11th level monk, 5th level bard. Did you catch that nonsense? I just went through it. Um, Never does he cast a spell. Never does he use any magic. He does beseech the gods and things like that. Just drop the princess and the dragon off at preschool. I'm not sure which is which. Not going to ask Shellback, but okay, neutral good. Um, I would actually go more lawful evil. When the other guys get here, who are going to review this with me, I don't know where they are, but that's just okay. My interpretation, maybe not even lawful evil, maybe chaotic neutral, but definitely not neutral good. He did whatever the hell he wanted, whenever he wanted, and uh, he was insanely selfish. Uh, 5th level cleric and druid. I'll give him the ranger part and the cleric, but druid, not really. You know, fighter, 12th level ranger, sure, why not? And that could be confused with druid, uh, even though he never actually cast any spells that I can remember. Uh, but the fifth level druid could have easily just been the higher levels of ranger where they get druid spells if you're going by AD&D. But like I said, I can't remember an instance where he cast anything like a spell. 10th level magic user, um, just no. I just I honestly don't remember anything like any of that. Now maybe later on down the line, uh, that was a thing, and there's no N key in here anywhere, which it should have just been in if they're going Babylonian, uh, N key should have been like right there. Anu, okay, the god of the sky, got that. uh, Anshar, god of darkness and the night. Druga, ruler of the underworld. Dahak, three-headed dragon, spirit of the earth. None of that came into play in Gilgamesh. Maybe these are other Babylonian mythologies I'm unfamiliar with, but almost none of this was mentioned in the Epic of Gilgamesh. And the things they describe here, sure, he liked to wrestle, and screw around and stuff like that, but for the most part, yeah, I'm gonna have to see like if there's a bibliography in here. I'm 100% certain there isn't. And mind you, then I'll check the copyright date of this, giving them further reference. Okay, there is, they call it Appendix 4, further reference. And it's a very short reference list. But okay, let's go over to the copyright date and see what these guys were smoking when they did. That's 1980. All right, maybe. I'll give them a little leeway. Maybe they had access to things that I'm, missing out on. But for the most part, um, seeing as how that Gilgamesh is the oldest recorded story that I'm aware of, and most people, everybody keeps telling me, it's the oldest story. Okay, all right, and if it's literally as close to word for word as the version that we all listen to, um, I was not really overwhelmed. For the most part, it's most of what I remembered when I had an actual physical copy of it. I don't know what happened to it. I was looking through my library and I couldn't find it. Um, but it was not all that exciting. It was insanely repetitive in the version we got. Uh, Talking about how long they traveled in a day and nothing happened. First, they traveled for 20 leagues or 20 miles, break for lunch, and travel another 30, 50 miles in a day on foot. Um, no, you're not doing that. It's just, I don't know. Seems kind of ridiculous, but I get the fact that it's, being that it's mythology and it has to be hyperbolic and over the top for, then, but there really wasn't anything in it that, other than claiming the other people that he did battle with were all that spectacular. Just taking the author's word that so and so was a great fighter, that doesn't really. There were no like uh, large examples of prowess. Let's go back and take a look at his stats. Um, a strength 20. Intelligence 18, Wisdom 17, Dex 18, Con 19, Charisma 18. His wisdom was like a 7. His intelligence was maybe a 9. I mean, he was no fool, but there were no examples of cunning or genius or insight whatsoever. Giving him those kind of numbers is just like demeans the numbers, don't you think? It was um, just really didn't. It wasn't warranted. A 20 strength. I don't. I mean, other than maybe fighting the bull, which okay. But I've watched bullfighters, fight bulls, and most of those guys don't look like they could freaking open a jar of pickles, let alone have a 20 strength. So it can be done. It's more about maybe the dexterity and the con, being able to travel as far as he did. But the intelligence and the wisdom, no. Charisma, he was king, so that automatically gives you like +6 charisma because you're king and everybody kisses your ass and does whatever you say for fear of you know imposing your will and your forces to do your will. So I don't know, man. I'm really kind of perplexed as to uh, other than the fact that it's really really old. Okay, but it's not really saying a whole lot, at least in my opinion, that makes it along the lines of the Greek or Roman or Egyptian mythologies. There was instances of magic and strange things happening and unusual events. There was really not that much. I mean, other than a lot of guys holding hands and wrestling and crying over one another. That's like the only strange and unusual thing I saw in most of the version we had. Now, I am remembering some other things in regards to the Tower of Babel and other things that maybe we did. The version I just listened to was not the best version. Let's see what Omen says in regards to that
Oh,
because
sorry,
I'm
I
I'm
forgot.
remembering.
I forgot what time it was.
Hey, no, it's okay. Don't worry about it. How you doing,
Pretty
man?
well. Um, so I have no complaints today.
I don't know if you heard anything I said earlier um,
I've listened to.
in the video in the last ten
No, I
minutes.
haven't. I just realized the time, so I got
Okay,
logged on. I kept thinking it was 8 o'clock, but it was like, nope, it's 7.
no, no. So you listen to the audio that was in the Discord?
Maybe not that. Well, I did listen. I've listened to about 2 or 3 different audiobooks. I did the one by Sargon of Akkad, which is
Okay.
the one you put in there. I listened to a couple
Mm-hmm.
of others as well. Well, I listened to one other version, which I actually liked better, but I think that's a more modern take of it.
Yeah, because the one that I listened to was incredibly lackluster and incredibly
That was
boring
the Sargon of Akkad. Uh,
and so repetitive. Oh my
well,
god.
they all were actually. I've been listening to the Iliad as
Uh,
well, and they repeat
mhm.
everything over and over. And I think part of it is that we're reading it and we're not listening to it. And there's a big difference.
Mhm.
Um, I know I haven't listened to that one, but I listened to at least two different versions of Gilgamesh, and then a couple of other people that were talking about the translations as well. And I was like, but
Mhm.
yeah, I agree. The
Mhm.
Sargon of Akkad, I thought he was going to do a better job, but it was about as flat and monotone as you could get.
It was in just boring, just really, really
I'd
boring.
have to put up a different one up there. Like I said, I was listening to one at work today, and I listened double speed because I don't have to pick up anything again because I've already listened to it once. And I was like, all right. And this was actually a lot more enjoyable. Um, I'm not saying I could tell it's a more modern translation, but I picked
Okay.
up other stuff. But yeah,
In the version that you read, wasn't there something about the Tower of Babel and trying to climb into heaven and things like
no,
that? What am I
I
thinking then?
don't know. You probably think of the Bible or something. No,
No, no,
so
no, 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 no. No, it was.
So the Gilgamesh, of course, was beginning with Enkidu, and that was the discussion of what was
Mhm.
going on. And of course, he was. So there was, of course, the of course, Gilgamesh is not a good guy when it starts off in the poem. Oh,
Mm.
I get first rights. First night with any woman that gets married, I get to beat anyone up.
Prima Nocta, not Nocturne, whatever it was called.
Anyway, yeah, it was anyway he did that, and then the gods created Enkidu, and Enkidu was the of course he was the wild man, and
Hmm.
he was Gilgamesh's equal, so it was what was going on there, and of course they had the big battle, and that's why I said the other version of this too sounded a lot more interesting, as they said they threw them this way, they threw them that way, and they were destroying the stalls, and um,
Hmm.
yeah, so that's what was going on there. And then, of course, Gilgamesh nearly wins. Well, let me phrase it. He does win. He throws them on the ground, and they look at each other, and they say, "Oh, wait a minute! I have found an equal." And then they're so happy because they found, an equal with each other. Oh, and
Hmm.
then, of course, after that, Gilgamesh he's like, "Well, I'll try becoming a good leader." And then people are like, "Oh, yay!" And of course, Enkidu was doing. Who is that? They kept calling a whore in the first one, and I've heard a priestess in another. But I think kind of
Hmm.
Ishtar's priestess.
Is there a difference?
Well, I think it is. Whenever you start doing the with Ishtar, is they're very similar. But yes,
Because before you got here, I was also going through the deities and
yeah.
demigods book, and rattling off, the description of him through the Babylonian myths chapter in the deities and demigods book. His stats: 20 strength, 18 intelligence, 17 wisdom, 18 dex, 19 con, 18 charisma. Um, where the hell did they get those numbers? He did nothing in the version, uh,
Oh yeah, he did.
the
So
Sargon.
the version I was listening to
Not.
was he was twice as big as any normal man, and that was the Sargon of Akkad's.
Mhm.
So of course he was. No one could best him. And so I don't see any problems. He reminded me very much of a Hercules style figure, And then they
Mhm.
Bob.
Well, I meant with like the 18 intelligence, 17 wisdom. Just
I
no, just not. There was what's up, Coochie? There's no way to even gauge that through this story. There's no act of cunning or science or reasoning or insight whatsoever. It's just he was king, therefore, and big and bad, therefore, you know what I mean. It was just like he was adult. There's no evidence of him having any greater than average intelligence or
I
wisdom whatsoever
I think that
in anything I
no, I
remember.
mean you can tell he gained wisdom at the end of the story as he started learning about.
But near divine
No,
master.
I didn't say that. No, I agree with you on the stats. Are
Yeah.
it's very easy I think to do physical stats in D&D. It's hard to find a mental stat. Um, I mean you could
Hmm. And charisma, he was king. Like I said at the beginning, everybody just did what he said because he was king. It wasn't because he was charming. He was forceful. He was rude, demanding, and cared not what anybody
at the
thought.
beginning that's true, and then that was part of with Enkidu because Enkidu would tell him the truth, which is what he liked about Enkidu. Enkidu is like, I'm not going to
Hmm.
kiss your butt. And he's like, yes, I finally found someone that isn't going to do it either for personal gain or fear. It's
Hmm. But an 18 charisma, a paladin plus charisma, no, I don't think so at all. Unless they're equating his physical beauty instead of charisma to charisma.
and that
You know what I mean? Like okay, if you said he had 18 comeliness or 19, I'd be like, sure, they mention
yeah.
that shit all the time, but that's not the same.
Well, and that's the part of it when you, of course, remember they didn't add comeliness until 5 years plus after the deities and demigods.
Right, right, because this was 1980. What's up,
And
Coochie?
that's the same thing whenever you start looking at dryads. And that's why I said is I kind of blow off a lot of the deities and demigods. I know that you were talking about.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It wasn't quite a cash grab, even though it was meant to be book four in the set. Like this
Yes.
is part of the core books. Now here's also okay. They got him down here in this as neutral good. not evil.
Not at the
Not
beginning. I
just
think at the end you could argue that, but not at the beginning. No, at the beginning
even in the end, I would give him at best,
I
chaotic
would
good.
still call.
Mind you, I look at neutral. I look at neutral good as like almost the better of the two is in the more goodly of the three alignments. As a neutral good being caring not for law or chaos, but what is the goodest of good thing that I can do to be goodest.
Yeah, but I don't. I
If that
don't.
makes
I think
sense.
that there's a difference between someone that represents freedom, which to me would be chaotic, and then neutral good would be one of
Mhm.
those that to me is a balance between, you know, because people forget lawful good can also mean very harsh. It doesn't necessarily,
Oh,
and,
absolutely,
and so
absolutely. It's what's the lawful best for you or the situation or the society or the group of people. What's the best by the book way to handle the situation? Whereas neutral good, I think, just focus mostly on the true tenets of good,
right.
including things like charity and mercy and things like that. That the other two can completely just you know piss
Yeah.
away. I don't have to be charitable because this is the law. I don't have to be charitable because I don't feel like being charitable. I'll be good. I'll put on a nice sweater, but I'm not giving you my
Well,
stuff.
to me, is good as and what I'm
That
going to
was a
take good
South
as
Park
this much
joke
as
in
you're
case
going to
you
do
didn't
something
recognize that.
altruistic even when it doesn't benefit you. Neutral means to me more selfish, and then evil is that you actively go out of your way even when it hurts yourself to hurt others. That's the way that I kind of define
Mhm.
those. And then chaos is
Some of those I totally agree with, but the neutral is uh, you can't be selfish and good.
well, no,
You
no,
know
no,
what I
no, no,
mean?
no, no. I'm saying on the good scale because to me they're two different. You
Okay.
know, you have the good scale, and then you have what I call the law versus chaos scale, which is law means that you're inflexible, and chaos means that you are capricious, and then neutral is you try to find the balance between the two, and that's what I look at when if you can do a 9 point alignment system. That's the way I look at it, and that's why if you look at the Greek gods, I don't disagree that a lot of them were chaotic. You know, it was but
They didn't have to be good. They were already gods. Who's gonna tell them no,
well,
right? Do you guys think it's important for a DM to read a good portion of the Appendix N reading list? Um, I suppose you could totally get away with it and be good without having ever read any of those books, but I would not believe that you could do so without reading a whole bunch of other
my
books.
view on this
Those are just what.
my view on a lot of it is what type of game do you want to play is why you read the Appendix N.
Mhm,
If
mhm.
you're going to do law and chaos, then to me, you have to, if you're going to do, we're going to do the BX, which is the three alignment system, then you need to read Moorcock. If you can do a nine
Mhm.
alignment system, which, you know, which I think sometimes complicates things because people get into all sorts of arguments over it. But to me, if you're going to be doing that, was hey, this is going to technically we can say good and evil, but you know, law abhors chaos just as much as good.
Yeah, but see, those concepts of law, chaos, neutrality, uh, were not prevalent throughout human history. The way good and evil had
Actually, they
been,
were.
and
They
still are.
were in a lot of ways.
Uh, but you don't hear people talk like that today. You hear this is a fight between good and
Yes,
evil
yes,
every
because
day.
we are
Morality versus the
Christian.
law chaos.
We are in a Christian environment. We didn't grow up back then. When, a lot of times,
Well, I mean, I do pay attention to other parts of the world, but
but
I
but no, no.
mean,
What I'm saying, but a lot of times,
I guess maybe if they don't look at things between a morale based system, then I can understand why the rest of the world is shit. Um,
well, remember,
and if they just go by like law, what is law and everything else, because I know certain places I'm not going to mention, it's uh, it's very important for them to maintain face and not look like they did something bad, but that's still having a form of a good and evil kind of
no, I
thing.
understand. Well, that's why. That's why I kind of liked the three alignment system, because guess what? You're aligning in one or the other instead of trying to go through. Because technically, by D&D, lawful good will be just as opposed to chaotic good as it is to lawful evil, which is, you know, not the way we normally think. We're like, well, it's good and evil. Yeah, but in their view, it's a lot of times law and chaos. And it's like, well, and people
Um,
don't play that way because people don't think of, well, they're doing this because not. No, they look at it's the difference between order and freedom, and the two still abhor each other for that. So it's, yeah, we don't think it,
you did, okay. Okay, Shellback, you did not like the Dying Earth. That was one of my favorites. Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser. The first book is not very good. The rest of the series, the rest of the six books or whatever, Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser, are fantastic short stories of weird fantasy D&D type stuff. Okay, the first book was awful. The Fafhrd backstory is just so cringy and so boring. Uh, Grey Mousers was a little more exciting when they got together. It was great, but it just gets better from that point on. The little stories that they did. Conan, always up there in the top
well,
10.
of course,
Um,
Conan is the
but you didn't like
making of
that fast. No,
Crawl.
I
Yeah, Call. I mean, he did Call the Conqueror, and then he went, well, you know, I need to rewrite this because, and
yep.
a lot of them, you know, for those pulp age were kind of formulaic. I mean, I do think we lost a lot because I would have loved to see R.E. Howard. If R.E. Howard had lived into his 50s, we would have gotten so many better
Um,
stories because he was really hitting his stride right about when he killed himself.
Coco Bo sent me, I believe, what you're talking about. There was some good stuff in there, some repeats, and it was a much bigger list. So, uh, uh,
See, Three Hearts and Three Lions. I think we did that one.
yeah, I did. I don't remember enjoying that one that much. The Dying Earth, I listened to it instead of reading it. And maybe that was why. And it was done so well. It was so fun and funny. I can see how reading it might be a little tiresome, but I absolutely loved it.
Here's the thing I liked about the Dying.
As a matter of fact, I almost cried a little bit, almost a little bit, when that one girl creation
Yeah.
died. That was really, really sad to me.
To me, the point
Um,
of Dying Earth is, don't get me wrong, is that really ups your reading level because it's not written at the seventh or eighth grade level. It's written at
mm, mm.
I'm sitting there a lot of times with the dictionary, which I didn't do as a child, but now I'm like, let me get the
It's
whole thing.
probably why the good Lord made me wait to read it, because I didn't read it until like 2 years ago, or I had it in my collection for decades, but I didn't listen to the audiobook. I'm going to call it
Yes.
reading for the very first time until like 2 years ago. So I was like, 57 the first time I had any experience to it. And I love it so much that I've got all of the Goodman Games stuff of it, thanks to Squirrel Hermit. And I've got the original version of it from I forget what company. And I got another copy of it coming
Helgren
in.
Press did
Um,
one, I believe.
yeah, thank you. Yeah, it was. And I can't wait to read that one. I couldn't get through Dying Earth. Of course, I don't like wizards. Maybe the Cuddle series is really good. Find the audiobooks, listen to them. It was it's so full of like like karmic retribution on the hero Cuggle, who's not really a hero. He's really kind of a shit. Um, Princess of Mars is fantastic. I love it. But Shellback, I am a big fan of magic users. To me, that's like, of all the things in the world that any one of us could be, I could have gone into the seminary, I could have been a priest, I could have gone into the service and been more of a fighterly type. I already did some shenanigans, so I've got, my lock picking skills, intact and well honed, learning new stuff every day. But being a wizard, making a sleep spell or making someone, you know, disintegrate or any of that, that's something you can't do. It's not real. So that's like the thing that excites me the most is being able to do this crap that isn't real that you can't do, but now you can in this game. You know what I mean? So for me, it's like it's huge. Um,
Here's what I think when we
I
talk about Jack Vance is Jack Vance did a very good economy of words. If you
mm,
actually look at it for the way he describes things, he does a great job at it. It's like, oh, let me go look at what this, you know, he's very efficient with his words. He is not a
well, and she makes up
yes.
words and which was awesome. And it was just so um, almost like lyrical and there was something just something so completely alien about everything he was talking about. I just got this sort of like like the movie Wizards and Dr. Seuss and Heavy Metal had a baby, and it was Jack Vance's
Well, I'm going to mention
story.
this much is
Of that,
you've also mentioned being post-apocalyptic, which is what Dying Earth is. Um,
mhm,
now,
mhm. And there's that, but it's so far in the future that it's just insane. Shellback, you if you like the movie, which I
first
love the
three
John Carter
books,
movie.
you want to get the
It's
first three books because they're the others they kind of fall off with John Carter, and then they use his ancillary um,
Yeah,
characters.
there's it's weird. I got to reread them because a couple of them are entirely about other characters. Like
Yep.
Thuvia is about somebody else, and John Carter is like not in the book. Kind of like in the Dying Earth, the second or the third book. Ged isn't even in the freaking story. I'm
Well,
like,
well, well, well.
yeah, it was still kind of good.
I'll be honest. I think I started with 10, which was what Thuvia of Mars. It was one of them in there, and I liked a lot of what they did. But they took
Mhm,
his ancillary characters or the children, and he did the same thing with Tarzan. Tarzan started focusing on his son, um, which is both good and bad.
mhm.
And to be fair, what was it? There was Thuvia. There was no, but they were all characters that knew John Carter. But then John Carter just faded in the back once he became Warlord of Mars. But yes, if you're gonna read it, go read the three,
I'll get back to you, Coochie. I know the first one
one through
is
three.
a Princess of
Princess of
Mars.
Mars, Gods of Mars, and Warlord of Mars. Those are the three.
Okay, okay,
Those are the three. But those are the first 3 books.
yeah, yeah. Because like there's another one later on, like John Carter, Warlord of
No, no, no. That's
Mars,
the
or
third
something
one.
like
That's
that, or
the
John
third one.
Carter Mars,
Um,
or
that's
there's one that comes later on that sounds like it's one. It has a very
yeah.
similar title to one of the others. So you can look it up and find them in
It was a.
order.
I'm sorry. It was a. I think it might have been
I
like John Carter of Mars, but yeah, it was Princess of Mars, Guards of Mars, and then Warlord of Mars. Those are the three. Um, anyway, let's go back to tough.
Yes, Martian women were hot. I've got a Deja
Yep.
Thoris 3D here, and then I've got another one. I got this one that pissed me off because it's all I can see the layer
Oh
lines
yeah.
from here. I am not sanding this
Well,
down.
that's a different
Um,
type. That's probably a filament one.
and then I've got another one here of Deja Thoris working on because she's literally the incomparable Deja Thoris. That means there's no other woman ever gonna be comparable. So that's got to be a hell of a thing to come home to. Um, the John Carter books are very very fast. Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's very much like the first couple of Amber books. There's like so much crap happens, and you're like, holy crap, this is only 190 pages. Now I want to get back to
Yep.
Gilgamesh. I was going also through the deities book and uh, going down his stats, including armor class 6. Okay, no armor, fine. Hit points 180.
That's fine.
That's a bit much.
I don't have any real
Yeah, I know.
problems.
I mean, compared to the 400 that some other characters will have later. Okay, that I can skip. 10% magic resistance. Like, why bother? Just make them save like a, as you'll see later on. Neutral good alignment, fifth level cleric and druid.
I
Really?
didn't say anything for that.
I didn't see.
That's the problem I have with a
I,
lot of them is they tend to just throw in, character classes. It's
mm-hmm.
almost like, and I don't know particularly for him. Like I could see that with Enkidu.
It's like they randomly rolled what character
Well, I
classes
mean,
he had. Because let me
sure,
finish real quick. 12th level ranger.
that's
Okay,
fine.
absolutely. Maybe even higher. I'll give you that. Let's okay. But then 10th level magic user, 11th level monk, and 5th level bard.
I can see the monk only for the fact they were trying to do unarmed combat.
totally. But Bard, I think Enki was or Enkidu was more of a freaking. He knew stuff, but then again, he was more druid, and it was the other people who were always telling him stuff that he didn't
I
know.
think
When it came to lore, he
I,
was like he didn't know
I think
shit,
Enkidu would
right?
make a better ranger because he has that befriend animals along with being a druid. I can see.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. Maybe they were. Maybe. To be honest, uh, special defenses cannot be charmed. Okay, fine. I think if you took all these professions and divided them in half, you'd be closer to the actual characters I just listed to.
I would have no problems putting him as like a 10th level monk or so. That doesn't bother me. I would have no problems putting like a 15th level ranger. I would put him as a fighter. I would put Enkidu.
Same
I
here.
would put Enkidu as probably like a 12th level ranger, and then Gilgamesh like a 15th level fighter. Um,
And maybe a fifth level cleric, but
I don't.
either he would be higher because he could speak to the gods, or he would be lower because he was just barely, he was actually below some of the other priestly classes in the story, was he
Or
not?
Enkidu or Gilgamesh. Yeah, Gilgamesh was
Gilgamesh.
not. His mother was the goddess. It was not. Like which I kept on trying to figure out. How do you get 1/3, 2/3? It makes no sense to me. Anyway,
Yeah, yeah, well, because clearly they didn't
I,
know math. Because as I'll go into later, the distances he traveled that kept being repeated on every like 15, 20 minutes. They had to tell me how he traveled for 20 miles or 20 leagues, and then he rested or had lunch, and then he traveled for another 30. And they said that, like, kid you not, like 15 times in the
I know.
book.
Well,
I'm
well,
like,
well. He traveled. Well, they would do leagues.
like 50
Well, no,
miles a
no,
day.
no. It was actually, if I remember correctly, it was 50 league. Was it? It was something like that. It was, yeah.
It could have been leagues. And even then, what the fuck's a league? Because if you look it up, you'll get
No, a
12
league is
different
6 miles.
answers.
It's
Um,
been stuff that's been in there. Um, anyway, I don't want to really talk about John Carter. We've done that in the other Appendix N stuff before.
mhm.
But it's not that I don't enjoy it. It's just we've already done that one. The distances didn't bother me. Again, I was listening to him like, okay, it sounded like they were traveling almost 150 miles a day for 3 days, and then they got Humbaba or Humbaba, which always got me, which was
Uh-huh.
Enkidu. And this is where I would get onto him was, no, you need to kill him. Like, what makes you think killing Humbaba was going to make the god happier than just letting him be a slave? That made no sense to me.
A lot of the things were just like, like selfish, wimmish desires to prove how macho so and so was. It's just like, I mean, I get it. It's thousands of years old, and it goes to show you just how primitive a lot of things were. Not everything, but we've evolved a lot in the last 5, 10, 100,000 years, however you want to go, to where we are now, where we need safe spaces and cry closets and words hurt us versus fighting a bull with your bare hands and kicking its ass, or a monster or what have you. Um, but
Well, I mean, Humbaba was the very first thing is he said, hey, I'll serve you if you let me live, which to me is very classic D&D. And Enkidu's like, no, you need to kill him. And I went, wait a minute, he's supposed to be a protector of the forest, which I thought was interesting. Was and
Mhm.
again, this is why I was listening.
There are a lot of contradictions by the way we see things, but maybe back then, they weren't so steadfast and hard, holding on hard to thoughts and concepts, and they were more fluid because he's freaking king. What are you
Well,
gonna do?
I also think the other part
You don't
was
argue with the king.
if we look at things a little differently but for them in many cases, you know, they looked at like the weather as the gods, and the weather was very chaotic and it was not predictable. And so you started looking at it, it's like,
Mhm.
well, and that was the point of when you were talking earlier in the week about omniscient. Well, the reason that they don't want their gods to be omniscient is because why do some people not get struck down and others do? And so it starts coming down to like, well, they don't see everything at all times. It's that kind of thing. Um,
And for a game, you can't throw too much of that in there. Otherwise, the players have no reason to be there. Other than to be the human die rollers for your deities and demigods mythology that you're creating. I get that, but at the same time, they shouldn't just be cardboard cutouts for the players and at the players' beck and call.
Well, and that's one of the things that,
Because
I
you
mean,
know
if
what I
we
mean.
wanted, again, this is where, if we're going to talk about D&D, and again, I know we're flipping back and forth between Gilgamesh. I think some of it is
Mhm.
it's more of an idea of how they thought rather than trying to think it's modern day. I think that's always a mistake of trying to do things.
But
Is
that's just it. It trying to think like they do um, has some issues that are hard to muddle through without either talking it out or doing
Yeah.
extensive research and writing up copious amounts of notes and then dropping them on your player's freaking table going,
Well,
okay, I figured it out, read this and you'll understand. No, no,
well,
no,
well,
no, no. Simplify it, make it easy to digest, and make
well.
it
That's
make
why I was
sense
listening
for the
to some
players.
people that were talking about the book or the story, that were not just doing the pure translation. Um,
Hmm.
and one of the things I think was, we think a little bit differently because we're like, oh, we care more about the environment. But back then, it was Humbaba prevented them from getting wood, and wood was necessary for basically all parts of life, for cooking, for building, things that we just don't
Hmm.
use as much for.
And all the things that lived in the woods that were tasty,
Well, actually,
you know.
if
Um,
you remember, he was really protecting the cedar forest. And once Gilgamesh defeated Humbaba, at that point, then, and by my understanding, there was a place in Lebanon where they could then begin to get cedar trees. And once they could say, hey, we now have this great riches, because, we don't think of it as much, but for them, that wood is incredible riches, worth probably far more than gold, because you can get
mhm,
gold, but you can't do too much with it. But with wood, you can do almost everything with that. So there was that aspect. And then, of course,
mhm.
rather than taming Humbaba, which is what I think he should have done, instead of, you have Enkidu, that's like, kill him. And to me, that was bad advice. And once they did that,
I wonder if that was like some sort of like we don't get, but thousands of years ago that was some sort of metaphor, for like not defeating a monster per se, but maybe like a disease or a belief system or a form of religion, or some sort of other culture or group of people or something like that. Because God knows how old uh, the story of Gilgamesh really
yeah,
is. You know
well,
what
I
I
said
mean?
was the first written one. Well,
Um,
I'm beginning to think, if you start looking at it, is because Enkidu said, do not, turn him into a slave, which, people forget at the time, your choice was either you return them whole, you enslave them, or you kill them. And you're like, well, I don't return my enemies unless I get something out of it. Well, there's nothing to do there. But what happens when Enkidu says that? When Baba says, I curse you to die, and one of you two to die. And then, he tells him that. And, you know, and the part I was listening to, again, the second one I was listening to, the gods meet together and say, well, one of the two must die. And they said, well, Gilgamesh has god blood and Enkidu does not, so Enkidu will die. And then Enkidu has the terrible vision of, everyone eats dust at the end, which again comes back to that dust to dust. We all go back to, and I think and that's what terrifies Gilgamesh. Not only did he lose his one friend, who was the only person that could actually relate to him for being basically a superhero. Is I know, I mean, that's it. Um,
well, and even in the end, he dies too. But like uh, I could have swore that in one of the versions I read there was something more to him trying to find the the go around to gain immortality
well, that was
um,
he was afraid of death.
through
I mean, that was the whole point.
right no but like his quest not just to find the plant
I'm not saying the
uh,
plant, but I'm saying,
but
but his
but
his
like
goal was to not die after he lost his friend Enkidu,
right
and it,
right and in the version
yeah,
I'm remembering um, there was more about that, like I said, like something about him, like trying to go to the lands of the gods, like walk there, as opposed to just find a magical fruit that would let him,
Well,
live
well, I mean, the first
forever.
thing they talk about is with Ishtar. Now she, and how all of her lovers she kind of tosses and curses in some way, shape, or form.
Well,
Yeah. Well,
yeah. I mean, that.
I think this is what I'm beginning to think if we're starting to talk about this. I think some of it is Gilgamesh represents the phases of our life. Like if you've ever watched a child, if they don't have something to keep them bound, they're destructive and capricious, and
Mhm.
I'm going to do whatever I want. And if they're, and then when he meets a good friend, and his friend is actually, Enkidu is actually pretty good, except for that last part. Um, but anyway, those are things. And then of course, when Ishtar says, "I am going to marry Gilgamesh," and Gilgamesh goes, and this is the one time he gets the wisdom part. He's like, no, you're not worth it. Which
Yeah, you're just gonna freaking use me, abuse me, make me write bad checks, and then leave me freaking
he was the first person ever red
for the
pilled,
next for the next.
based upon her history. That was,
That was fun.
and then and then and then
Kokos's theater is
and then look at what she did.
good.
She cried and said, if you don't destroy him, which is you see these women out there that do that, I will bring back the very dead, and they will outnumber the living. She's going to release all of the undead on the world if they don't do that. So of course it's in the RX after. And actually, when we say an RX, that's really they're saying a bull is just a male. So you have bull elephants, you have bull aurochs. Um, but yeah, but that's when she gets you know, the, the bull to come down, and that's when they fight it and kill it. And it's like, well, okay, that's it. Um, but unfortunately, of course, Enkidu, dies, and then he's passing that on, and I think that represents our middle part of the life when we start seeing our parents die or the people we love, and we start realizing, hey,
Mhm.
we have our own mortality, and then it's like, well, instead of trying to say I'm going for fame and glory, which is what he did at the beginning, when you're young, that's what you go for. I want all the shinies and
Mhm.
all the accolades and everything else. It's like, well, what's my lasting legacy? How can I live forever? And I thought it was interesting when he says, well, there's this one person, if you just know where to find him. It's like, okay, I'll go off and find Shemesh, as he goes over. And then I thought it was interesting when they had the two monsters, which I'm not sure if they have in deities and demigods, the ones that were, half scorpion, half men.
I was going to mention that because DM James was talking about them for Hyperborea, and I'm like, those come from, essentially, Gilgamesh. The centaur man scorpion thing is pretty freaking old. It goes back to all the way back then, and um,
Probably 8,000 years ago, something like that. And it probably was well before them. Remember,
mhm,
this is the first time that's been written down. And apparently they found different versions of the same story over and over again. They just kept writing it down and refining it.
mhm,
Um,
mhm.
so, of course, what does he do? It says, well, if you go in there, and again, this is the second version, which I heard earlier, is they go into the tunnel and there is no one that can see it. And, there is darkness. And which really,
Oh God, that was so. Oh God, that was so annoying. Each day describing there was nothing, couldn't see behind him, couldn't see ahead of him. Then the next day, couldn't see ahead of him, couldn't see behind him. You know, you could have just said after 12 days, he finally got out of the darkness. Instead of telling me the exact same thing for 12 days it was like, oh, it was so annoying to listen to that. Because I didn't know if there was going to be something, in the middle of one of those days, something happened, but nothing
well,
happened.
apparently what was supposed to
Oh my
happen is he
God.
was, and again, it depends on which version. Again, we both listen to Sargon of Akkad, and normally I like him, but this was just too flat. But the other version I heard is that he went through the tunnel within one day, and he actually made Chemish from one side to the other, but he couldn't see anything over. And then I thought it was interesting when they talk about when he finally makes it through. And then the other part is we're talking about grief. what did he do? When his friend Enkidu died, he completely let himself go. He was he was starving. He was ill dressed. He had not showered in like months. He was basically becoming like Enkidu had been before he was there.
Hmm.
Yeah.
But more bitchy.
Well, yeah. Did he
You
get?
know, and I wanted to say, Sargon actually reading it the way he did kind of drove home to me how simple and primitive, and how much there really isn't much of a story. You know what I mean? Not to be mean or anything, but because it is so old, it is primitive. It is
I'm gonna
simple
bring.
and basic.
I think.
You know what I mean?
I think we're looking at it
It,
a
it
different way. We're looking as if people had books, but back then people did everything by oration.
No, I get that. The time, that's how things were. They were simple. They were primitive back then. They were repetitive, and something like this was a big deal to them. To me, it's like I have read tens of thousands of stories over my lifetime, including like
Sure.
comic books and other things like that. So this is like just like one of the most boring things I've ever read in my life, because I'm freaking spoiled rotten. But I can understand that to those people back then, this was like Star Wars when we first saw it in '77. To them, this was like, oh my god, have you not
I'm
heard?
going to bring it up a little bit different.
Uh,
Think of it this way: this is the first time they had like a talking movie. It was like, oh, you have a movie for that. It's because the same thing for 2 hours. Basically, you can assume that the person that was reciting this was doing it from memory, and they recited it over and over again. Yeah, I'm familiar with
mhm.
ARCs. Yep. But that was the whole point, is they came over and over again, and that's why it was somewhat repetitive. One is to help the people do it, because I've been also listening to the Iliad, and I've been listening sometimes it in
Mhm.
Greek, um, which is very interesting to listen to, not the whole thing, but just bits and pieces. I'm trying to go through the Iliad, and you're like, oh, I understand why they did this. This is, because we don't have the oral tradition anymore. We don't have people that tell a lot of stories, and even people that do tell stories are very rarely over what, an hour, if that. Um,
Yeah, I mean, the closest we get is someone telling us about a movie they saw and trying to, squeeze it into 5 minutes to get you to go watch
no,
the
no, no, no.
movie,
I'm
right?
referring to, like your grandparents or something like that, or your aunt, if they actually learned how to do
I
storytelling.
don't know. I didn't have those growing up, so I don't know what that's like.
Well, a good example was a little different because people get really mad about this, but if you ever listen to Burr Rabbit, and or even the
Song of the South.
well, it was called, yeah, it wasn't, I don't think it was called The Sound of the South. It was called,
No, that's the
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Disney movie
yeah.
adaptation. I
But
saw
but
that, and if my mom read me any of those, I don't remember them. I do remember the Fantastic Mr. Fox and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, but I don't remember ever having been read Brer Rabbit. I do know the story
but there's
because I
several
saw
stories in Burr Rabbit, and several of them only like
right,
3 to 5 pages. And and the
hmm
same thing
like
happens.
Grimm fairy
Yeah,
tales and
yeah,
things like
because the,
that.
the point was is we're telling you a story. So when you look at Gilgamesh, which is, they're doing a 2 hour recitation instead of a 20-minute story. I mean, that was something you
Mhm.
said. When someone was reciting it, it's like going to a play. Hey, we're going to go over here, and we're going to see the person going through. And I'll bet you a lot of times, not that we do this, but I'll bet you a lot of times they sang the whole thing too. I was
I would not be surprised at all that at least one person, in ancient history, uh,
Yeah.
at least one person in history was able to sing the story because that was their thing. Maybe more, I don't know. Um,
Well, I mean, that's why when they do the cuneiform, when they actually write stuff down. But you know,
mhm. I really do think though, like you were onto
yeah.
something with that it being an allegory for something. There was a lesson that the people got from it. Maybe just not to uh, not to go after the
Yeah.
power of the gods, or to, you will die. This is just, even the greatest of us do that, or other things. Maybe, different parts of the story were, like maybe there was this, it was broken down like this part is to teach you this,
Yeah.
and then this part is to teach you that. you know Maybe they dragged it out over the course of, several nights. The storyteller would be like, oh, I'm going to tell you the story, but I'm only going to get to
Yep.
here. That way, you'll feed me tomorrow, and then I'll tell you the rest of the story to a point here, and then I'll be the entertainment for the evening. The skalds and the bards and things like that, and maybe they drug it out and broke it down in ways that, you know during the next day, the people would go up to the storyteller and ask him, what was the meaning of that part of the story, kind of thing. That it was more than just, their version of, science fiction and fantasy
Yeah,
entertainment.
I
You know
don't
what I
think
mean? I
that they
think
were
all.
necessarily passive in this. Not like what we. They didn't go to the movie theater and forget about Gilgamesh. I don't think that was what they did. Um,
No, no, I'm sure they all talked about it for weeks, if not years, afterward. We don't have any other records of other competing stories of the era, so it could easily be, that was it. Everybody, they're probably tired of the story, by the time they were 20. It's like, oh my God, if I have to hear another story about Gilgamesh, I'm going to freaking hurl.
well, I
Um,
think that
we don't know. We don't have any examples, or that's what I was going to ask you, because like, uh, in both the Sumerian and the Babylonian Cthulhu, or not Cthulhu, sections of the deities and demigods book, there are mentions of competing gods. Enlil and Anu, in both, in the two different chapters of the deities and demigods book, and all of them were talked about in this book.
yeah.
I'm wondering, there had to be other stories that I'm just not familiar with.
Well, I
Uh,
think if
Babylonian and Sumerian
which one
mythology weren't really my bag back in
which
the
one was
day.
Marduk on? If you look in deities and demigods, which
Uh,
one? Which is which?
I think it was Sumerian.
So okay, but see,
Uh,
Marduk had his own stuff along with Tiamat. Now, of course, they made Tiamat a dragon, but which is different than what it is in the book.
well, it was a serpent. It was, it was like the equivalent of the dragon, Satan type archetypal, evil god
Well, a
looking
lot of
thing.
times they viewed her as chaos, and they viewed Marduk as law, and they're like, she did this.
It's interesting in the, believe it or not, in the fake but actually printed Necronomicon. All of that is talked about in great detail. Um,
Yeah.
in the, you guys ever see the copy of the Necronomicon in the Epic magazine by Marvel? It was their version of like heavy metal,
Okay.
and there'd be these hardcover copies you could buy the
I remember
Necronomicon.
seeing it at the
Um,
bookstores when I used to go down. Yeah.
and I've got a couple of copies, and um, it talks a lot about, it mixes Cthulhu like it's
Sure.
real, and Babylonian and Sumerian mythologies like they're all part of the same thing. Because we all know, that everything H.P. Lovecraft wrote was not true. It was all made up. But this guy Simon, who was the supposed author of that, tried to weave all that crap together along with some very questionable black magic practices, um, as if it was all real. It's quite interesting, just to put it
But I
that
mean,
way.
when you
It's messed up, but
but apparently Marduk was, and again, the problem is I haven't kept up on my ancient stories. I've been going back and listening to stuff, and some of them I never listened to, just because they were long and stuff like this. Like I'm going back and listening to the Iliad, and I'd heard the story of the Iliad, but I like listening to the actual details. And,
I have a copy of it
and you
downstairs.
start noticing that, when they start, yeah, that. But I find that interesting because the question is like how do the gods influence within your game, and you start realizing that the gods are much more hands-on than they were in the normal typical D&D. And to be fair, it's not that hard to do some things, which is, your cleric, and this is where I kind of do it, which I understand why he does it as a game, but your cleric shouldn't really have to request the spell until they need it. Like the magic users, I understand, hey, you're trying to do it with a Vancian style. But with the clerics, I'm not sure why you're doing
Mhm.
a Vancian style cleric aspect. It should be, hey, you can request the
Um,
God.
I can explain it really
No,
simply.
it's a game.
The desire for perceived game
Yeah.
fairness.
Well, I would have much preferred if Gygax had done it again. I know he put in the wisdom. I would have much preferred him to go in and knock it down and say, guess what? You have a chance of failure depending on your level, and the gods will listen or not. And you appeal to your gods. Um,
Yeah, I see. I was making a joke the other day with some guys on somebody else's stream. I
yes.
think like when I go to church on Sunday, my priest, the priest of the church, the service that I'm going to see, he blesses like everybody, and after the service he will bless anybody who
Right.
comes up to him.
Yeah.
He's got like unlimited first level
Well,
spells.
well. Again, the question is
Okay,
how.
so
I don't know. The question
maybe
is, while you're blessing everyone, how many actually receive a beneficial aspect to it? Um,
well, I mean, you could go at it, from a psychological standpoint, which
well,
I'm
I'm saying from a
versed in.
mechanical
It could all
standpoint.
be in their head. It could all be in their head. I don't believe that, but I could make the argument, play devil's advocate. It could all be in their head, and because they think it works, or they're just going to, attribute anything good happening to that, which reinforces the whole circle, never ending, coming back to church, getting blessed, and continuing on with one's faith. I don't believe that's what's going on, but
Well, you
it's
can do
just
whatever you
it's
want,
kind
but the question really comes down from a mechanical benefit, which is what you're looking at. How many are receiving the mechanical benefit, not just, hey, I feel blessed? Because to me, a cleric should be able to do that, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you get any bonuses. Um, you know,
right. My point was is it's kind of like along the lines about like how you think, and I agree that magic users should detecting magic and a few other things that are first level spells should just be
yep.
abilities. I think the same with the bare minimum bless. No offense, the bare minimum bless should be like just a thing. I could just do the thing, and not me personally. I'm not qualified, but a worthy bestower should be able to just do the thing. And I mean, it's only plus one, 5%. I mean, I know that it can change everything or whatever, but it can also have literally no effect. I've seen it a thousand times where, a bless goes off and it literally changes
Well,
nothing.
and the point of really when you start doing
Because
the
they
bless
just keep
is the
missing.
bless is supposed to affect the whole group, um, which
I've literally seen where it didn't matter because everybody needed a
oh yeah.
17, 18, or 19, and they just weren't going to
Well, a
get that.
17, 18, or 19,
Four rounds,
uh,
5 rounds of
a,
combat, and it
well,
didn't
a bless
happen.
will help a lot more if you need to roll 20s because now you've doubled your chance. You've got to double from 5 to 10. But
Certainly, but your chance is still nil.
well, it's not nil. Your chance goes from 5% to 10%. Um, but 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 I will agree with you is if you're hitting on like fours, it's probably not making any real difference because that's what it comes down to it. Um, you know, um, I don't really care. I don't care about WotC anyway. Um, but no, when we're talking about like for Gilgamesh, that was the part when he goes in there and they look at him like you're dirty, you're starving, and you're
You need to wash your
yeah,
ass,
you're
and
and he says I'm king, and they're just like,
it was
what do you mean you're
so,
king? Um, and then when you talk about
yeah,
with wisdom, when he goes over there and he meets the ferryman, and he just starts breaking the statues because he's unhappy. It's like you're a little child going into a temper tantrum. Um, that's what I look at. Um, that's what got me is you did this, and then this is where we're going to talk about you were strong and heroic. Um, it's where they removed the where he gets the poles, and they can only go one way. Take him across.
mhm.
And I did think it was interesting when he goes over there and he finds out, well, how in the world can I become immortal? He says, well, the gods all have to get convened. The gods have to agree, and the gods have to, say yes. My punishment was excessive. and that's why I'm immortal. And Gilgamesh is like, he says, well, if you can stay awake for 7 days, that's close. And he couldn't even do that, and then he wakes up and he realizes that he is mortal, no matter what.
Which is weird because with a constitution of 20, um,
Well, again, I don't,
it should be no trouble
well, I'm not
whatsoever.
looking at that as,
I know. My point is that um, Ward and Kuntz, who wrote those books, clearly didn't do like hardly any research at all, or they were doing it all from
I
memory.
think,
And a book like that book, the Deities and Demigods book, I would need that shit right there in front of me as I'm writing the section on, Egyptian mythology. I would want as much Egyptian mythology in my possession right there that I could reference and be a little better at it. But it's almost like, well, no one's going to be reading that. Nobody reads that stuff anyways. We can just kind of, you know,
I think,
fudge it a little here and there and go from memory, and nobody's going to pay any attention and
well,
worry
Tim
about it.
Cast,
You know what I
well,
mean?
some of that I think was taken from the first edition when Tim Cast said, oh, well, people said they're going to kill Thor. And like, you know what? We're just going to give him all these hit points. So no, you aren't going to just easily kill off Thor. But, the old thing is if you stat it, that means you can kill it. If you don't want the players to kill it, you never
Hmm.
stat it. I think that there's,
Or you make, or you add, you do it right and make them, you know, to the point where if I were to have statted them, I would have added like zeros to
I
everything.
don't know.
To the numbers that nobody could ever
I,
get
I,
to.
I,
Just like you can't get there.
I mean, I have mixed feelings about it because again, I was reading the Iliad, and Diomedes was the one, and he was actually wounding. He wounded Aphrodite. He wounded Ares. Now, that doesn't mean he could kill them. Which is, if you read deities and
Mhm.
demigods, if they come to the earth, you don't kill them. You banish their avatar,
Send them
and you're
back.
supposed to go to their
Hmm.
plane. Well, if you go to their plane, that's a whole different thing because now they have attendants and everybody else. You don't just, you know,
Hmm.
yes,
Armies of previously, everybody who died serving them is up there,
exactly.
in that form. And they made the same rules for demons and devils. It was like you kill them here, they just go back to hell, and then they reform and come back, and come back to get you later, decade later or whatever it is. Obviously with the gods and demigods, it was a little bit different, but the same sort of thing. And if you go in their home turf, you're
Well,
retarded. And if you think you could do it, you're also you're just so immature and
well, it
and
was supposed to
un,
be those.
and
That was
so
supposed to be the epic.
poorly
Well, that was
read.
supposed to be the epic of you went into hell, you know, and you would have to do certain things. I
Hmm.
mean, we do have good stories.
We all did it, right? Everybody has had at least one hell campaign where you're in hell doing things, fighting demons and devils, which is again a complete lack of maturity, thinking that you could do those things. I mean, yeah, it sounds awesome even at my age. I don't know, with the wisdom that I have, the meager amounts that I've gained, it's fucking stupid. It's fucking
Well,
childish,
at that
immature,
point,
and just absolutely
I'm
not.
going to be,
The odds are so like
I'm going to disagree with you
ridiculously
on this. Okay,
against you.
I'm going to disagree with you on a few things, but this is where I see the 3.5, and I'm disagreeing with that part. Was you were supposed to be a certain level before you could go to those epic, which I think 3.5 said you had to be 20th level or above to get to those.
Mhm,
Um, Otherwise, your character could do nothing. And then the other part is,
mhm,
if you've ever noticed all of the heroes, if they went into the underworld or whatever, they always had some magical protection from some other god, and they had something else. They had, it wasn't just items. It's like you went there as with certain items and things to keep things at bay, and those are
mhm.
very classic aspect. But it's not like,
A seal of whatever, and everything recognize that as you are under the protection of so and so, and don't even try it.
or
Um,
the same thing with like Hercules going down, and when you're dealing with Cerberus, you had to pay your proper respects, but you could go down there. But those were only for the greatest heroes, and usually things didn't turn out well for them anyway. Uh,
mhm.
it,
Right,
at
and
some point,
and I had never read a single page of 3.5 Shellback, but for us, it was. we didn't know any better, and we didn't know we were doing anything wrong, and really we weren't. There are books, our games, our you know the game police weren't going to come and tell us we were breaking any laws or doing anything stupid. We had plenty of that from other grown-ups, but not the game police. They didn't know where we were hiding. Um,
And
but
I don't, you've
But
had
looking
one.
back, I had this guy come on the show like a week or two ago with that sort of mentality that we didn't know what we are doing because we never did that. We never went and killed the gods, or we didn't know how to do it like that. So we must be like noob players. No, we just actually had some common sense, and we weren't playing these uber power fantasies. We were playing
Well,
like regular games that not saying he was super wrong, but the way the guy was going about it
I,
was incredibly, insanely immature. Because I did participate in a god slaying kind of campaign, and I read Corum, the Chronicles of Corum by Michael Moorcock, where Corum went and killed all the gods. So did Elric, and you know. Um, so
but
I
but
understand where
but
people
even
got those
even
ideas.
even Elric, he was under protection of various gods, and they were conflicting with it, and they, of course, he had the special item. He didn't just do it willy nilly, like wandering around killing everything. Um, and well, we're not arguing about 3.5. We're just saying that we're trying to talk about. We're not trying. I'm not. I know Shadows bring up D&D. I'm not even trying to look at D&D for a lot of stuff because I like reading stuff for just other things. Now, again, I know it's an Appendix N. Most of us grew up on Greek mythology, Norse mythology. I miss Gilgamesh. I never liked Beowulf, but I can see some aspects for Beowulf, Hercules, and Gilgamesh, which is
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times it was they did things with their hands and they did have an axe, they did have a weapon. Um, but in almost all cases, they were divine beings or partially divine, which what the word demigod, partial god. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I have nothing against any of the systems. People can complain about 5e and every. What I really complain about is how easy is it to run. And I have play the games you like to play. That's all I can say. Play the games
Mm-hmm.
that you like to play with the people you like to play with. I can't tell you playing a wrong game. I can tell you this much: don't start arguing about, well, the law does this. That's where we can argue about the rules. But it's your game, and the idea is you were supposed to take the core of it and then modify it, which is why there's so many different systems out there for OSC and all these other things. That's why I really like Dark Sun. Dark Sun said, okay, we're going to stop doing the European mythology or the normal Earth mythology, and we're going to put you in something completely different. I was like, that's cool. I've been reading parts of Planescape. I'm like, this is really cool. I wish they had done this for the Manual of the Planes. Um,
Yeah, Emmanuel Plains is really uh, weak
it's too
sauce.
it's too short of a book is the problem. They try putting everything in there.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
I actually
I
like
mean, I'm
Manual of
glad
the
I have my
Planes.
copy, and I do have the
Yeah,
Planescape box set, which I will be reviewing in the next 6 months. I just uh, haven't had uh, the right inspiration to want to go and jump into it because
I
I,
think I
I
think
just know I'm going to change so much of it to fit the way I see things, anyways. That's why I never
but
really used the Deities and Demigods book that much.
deities and every. Well, I mean, I hate saying this. This is from my perspective, from a game perspective. Um, well, and you talk about level caps and things like that. And you kind of go, well, I'm a cleric. I'm going to worship the demigod. And you're like, well, this sucks. I'm capped at 5th level. And it's not that hard to get 9th level as a cleric. You're like, oh, man. And you're like, well, I might as well just retire this character. And that kind of bugged me for that aspect. I think that in some ways they did a decent job with. There are things I loved about 2E, and there are some things I hated about 2E. But I do like the fact that in 2E it was like your god has certain spheres, and that's what they have, and that's what your cleric represented,
It made
and then you
perfect
could,
sense. It
yeah,
2E, that was one of the few things 2E did better. The Thief and the Cleric were drastically better than the traditional Knight's Hospital or whatever that the cleric was trying to represent. That's great if you're running that specific world setting, um, but that stopped being the thing about 8 minutes after the game came out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's well, and that's what everyone has their things, and Gygax put his stuff in there, and Gygax, I don't think, and to be fair, even though you give a lot of stuff, there are ways we could have jumped up faster in levels, but if we played weekly, we still only got up to we're only what 12th to 13th level. Um, there are ways of going up faster, but we haven't chosen them. Um, but overall, the game is that's what he was looking at. And really, to me, AD&D, and while he said was tournament, when I started looking at the rules, it was meant to get the characters very slow leveling, very, very slow leveling. Um, he didn't want the players to get up a level more than once per month, if that. Um,
And that's unrealistic expectations on his part. He
well,
should know just by like breathing in and out. He should know that anybody who gets anything that's good is going to abuse it. I mean, I don't know if he had done cocaine yet by that time, or if that came later. By how much?
just remember, he was playing with his gaming group, and he had 50 plus players all playing at the same time. And he was.
Mhm.
I don't disagree with certain things. What he didn't think of, and he had the RPGA and stuff. He was used to playing in clubs. Hey, everyone in
Mhm.
the club is going to play this. But by the time I got the book, and I know you were before me, it was 82. 82, guess what? The only people playing D&D were playing like 4 or 5 players. Um,
Mhm.
for a lot of us. And everyone had their own little groups. We weren't playing in this massive multi, bronze team style game. We weren't
Yeah,
part
I
of
had
club.
in 1979, 80. I had both experiences playing at home with my friends, and then playing at the shop, which was kind of like a club, and there were regular
Yep.
people, and but it was still free form. You could play with whoever you want, whatever. Different games, different characters, and all that. But I mean, to think that people weren't going to do it, play more than he did. Playing the same characters day after, like literally. I mean, some of us played every single day, even if it was just
Well,
for a couple of hours. That adds up. You
I
know,
think that but I think that, and this is what he was. Well, again, we're looking at the white box, where people flew up levels, and he was mad about that. And so his version was to stop that. That's where the AD&D came from. You know,
Mhm.
that's what
Well,
that's why
it's funny though because like um, everything in White Box is more or less in AD&D First Edition.
it
And
is,
some
but it's not meant to slow things down. In white box characters, he was finding characters that were like 50 or 100. They were at really high levels. Um, oh, still there? You froze on me.
to go up fast.
Oh no, no,
Sorry,
no. Yeah, you're back. But no, I mean,
I
but look at everything that he does. It's intended to slow you down, up to the point that we're and this one can compare it to basic D&D. Basic D&D just simply says you get experience points for getting the stuff out of the dungeon. Whereas when you started going back to when you go into and basic was just a continuation of the old white box in many ways. But AD&D, notice what it says. Oh, as soon as you get that level, you have to train, and you're not allowed to get you're not allowed to get one experience point more. But the same point is you have to have enough money to go up that level. So let's assume that you played a thief and you didn't do all the thieving things you should have. They said, you know what? It's going to take you 2 weeks. That's 2,000 gold or 2 or 3,000 gold. And you're like, well, I would have been third level if I hadn't done this. And he did that intentionally to slow the progression because I think he was mad that too many people were flying up levels. Um, because they said in the
and
old
it
white
still
box,
never
people,
stopped anybody. Despite what he may have wanted, it really didn't stop anybody I knew from coming to the shop with characters that had 20, 30, 40th level characters. uh
I know, but my point is a lot of us didn't play like Gygax says to play in AD&D. That's what I'm trying to say. Most of us played, to be fair, most of us played a combination of BX slash AD&D. We took the stuff that was in AD&D and we threw out the stuff that was overly complicated, and we used a lot of the BX, and then we would add rules on top of it. Um, I,
It's funny
you know,
too because even in when I was going through the early episode or early issues of Dragon magazine, there were still letters coming into to the people at the team talking about their 20 to 50th level characters um, in issue 1 through 15 of Dragon magazine.
yeah, but that was still under the BX stuff. That was not necessarily under the AD&D stuff. That was under
No,
the
it was
old.
under White Box.
That's what I mean. But that's what I'm saying. Under White Box, there was no limitation or training for that, and he put that in the AD&D to slow down that high level coming up. That's what I'm referring to. BX never put that in there, and in fact, if I remember correctly, Cass Lambert was the first one that says, "Oh, it's not a 1-to-1 time," which was the other part. Because I don't know how you were, but I never played 1-to-1 time. If we were in the middle of the dungeon, I didn't say you had to leave the dungeon. I said, okay, we're going to stop and we're going to start back from where you were.
Exactly. It was literally like every TV show we'd ever watch. It's like, okay, we'll pick up tomorrow, and you're here at this room listening at the door, but mom says I gotta go home or whatever. We didn't have those arbitrary rules that were designed purely because his ego and and,
I'm not
and
saying it
desire.
was ego. Remember, he played in.
Well, I wasn't
Uh,
done. I
uh,
was adding to not
yeah,
just his ego, but his desire to make as many people happy as he could by letting them in his games. He had spread himself so thin that he had to come up with the 1-to-1 thing to be able to manage it. Whereas we didn't have that limitation. I mean, I had a table once or twice that had 20 people at it, but that wasn't a regular thing. It was like six. Okay.
well, I'm going to
And
bring
when
this
you've
up
only
too.
got
Which
that many players,
yeah,
you're just like, hey, I'll see you here tomorrow.
yeah, but what I'm
You're not
saying is
here.
for him, the way that he did it was,
Mhm.
because he wasn't the only dungeon master, and he said, well, we have to do, and I understand from a logistical standpoint,
Mhm.
if we want the game to move forward and you want other players to be in there, you have to do the you have to do a 1-to-1, which meant that people had to leave because they a lot of times they're using the same dungeon. So you had to leave by this time, and once you left, then the next group came in. So when we start talking about finding it once per level or something, some of that is, hey, guess what? The next thief can come in and can try picking the lock, and if they pick the lock before you were able to get through, then guess what? They make it to the deeper part of the dungeon. So it encouraged them to do stuff. But
Mhm.
remember, we weren't playing. Maybe you were, but I wasn't playing in gaming groups. I was playing. You know what I'm talking about? Is an organized RPGA
Yeah, you
style.
had your 5, 6, 12
Yeah,
friends, whoever they were. They were all going to meet on this day at this time to play this game, and it would pick up or
yeah.
continue from wherever you guys left off, which makes way more sense. No matter how you try to justify it, not you, but
Right, right. Well,
folks
well,
out
I'm
there
just
that are
saying
trying to
that
trying
the
to
way.
run that game because that's the way they did it. It's like, yeah, you don't have that many people wanting to play. Don't kid
Again,
yourself.
that again, he was looking at, I would almost call he was looking at a, what I want to call it, the RPGA. He was looking at it from that style and said, well, I need to create a game for that, which is where Holmes and the White Box did so well, in my view, for this was they didn't do that. And actually, as much as we joke about stuff, and as much people talk about advanced, BX outsold first and second edition combined. Um,
Yeah, but that's because of how well AD&D sold to begin with. You know what I mean? If you switched them, if you said BX came out before AD&D, if you did that, AD&D would have sold better.
well, BX came out
You see what I'm saying?
if you
It's
look at.
only success was built on the success of the previous edition. So saying it did better, that's like saying more people went to watch the shittiest movie in 2026
But it wasn't.
than went.
AD&D didn't really come out. I mean, if you start looking at the two, is we're going to go with the blue box. If you can go with Professor Holmes, his idea was, hey, this we're going to try getting people into it, and that was supposed to dovetail to the old white box, and so a lot of people did that. But and I'm going to bring this up, which is look at the, and I was watching Daddy Rolled One, and I don't disagree with him on this. A lot of it had to do with formatting, the formatting of BX. And what was the age group? What was the age group?
Well, you're missing my point entirely. When did BX come out after AD&D?
The BX did, but the basic Holmes came out in 1977. So technically it was concurrent.
Okay, I'm not forget about the basic box. That was utter disaster as far as I'm concerned.
You may have been
BX,
concerned about that, but I'm saying the reality of it is that
yeah,
it
because
was,
people got it and then told other people what a waste of time it was if you were already playing AD&D,
but
buying
AD&D
that
wasn't,
box.
AD&D really wasn't out until 79 when you got the Dungeon Master's Guide.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah,
Well,
you had a monster manual. Okay, fine. I described the monsters to use in the old white box or whatever else,
mm-hmm.
which is why you got different rules from what's in the monster manual, the player's handbook, and from the player's handbook to the Dungeon Master's Guide. It was, whereas you had the basic stuff, and the idea was kind of to bring that in. So I'm not saying that AD&D did that, because most people's exposure was not to AD&D. Most people's exposure was to BX starting off.
Mm-hmm.
And,
But like I said, BX came out after AD&D, correct? For the most part.
the red box, the red magento came out. Yes, that came out 2 years after they basically had the Dungeon Master's Guide. But
Okay, which means that it couldn't help be better because it was able to correct any perceived mistakes that AD&D had. It's literally like saying, uh, it literally had everything, from AD&D to base to work from instead of being made from whole cloth. It tried to fix every possible mistake that was, you
it
know,
was no. I'm not going to say it's, well. There's some of that. I mean, you do have a lot of things where it had more
you
years of
can't
play.
deny that. I mean, that's like saying, hey,
No. Here's the difference. I'm going to bring this up because what was the AD&D was aimed at an older age group, usually around college age,
uh-huh.
and BX was aimed at 10-year-olds.
Exactly, which could be perceived as a marketing mistake by AD&D's creators, and if they would have marketed toward kids who had more disposable income, it would make more money.
But it would not have, and it's what I'm trying to say. AD&D was, whenever you say the word advanced, all of a sudden you're also saying more complexity, more confusion, more, the barrier of entry is much higher. You have 3 books for that.
Uh-huh.
You have to buy the 3 books to play the game.
Uh-huh.
And that,
Well,
well, no, I
one
mean,
one person does. One person does. Yeah.
yeah, but here's the difference with BX, and we're going to say basic. You buy 1 book, you have a playable game out of the box. And then if you want to keep playing, you say, okay, I'll buy the expert set.
Again, you're proving my point by saying they improved on the mistake of AD&D, making it more sellable.
Right. But again, because of that, that's what I'm saying. But the other thing was, if you notice, it generally doesn't have the demons and devils. It has the much more kid-friendly aspect to it. So it had a broader market. It's the same reason, like whenever you look at why do PG-13 movies make more than R movies? Usually because it has a bigger audience that it can be sold to. It's a
Again,
marketing thing, but it was also better written too. I mean, if you read the
that's also proving my point. They could see that Gygax, this freaking kook, had a great idea, but if we rewrite it more intelligibly for the lowest common denominator, we'll make more money.
I'm not, and I don't even like the idea of the lowest common denominator. I think that's a lot of bullshit. I think a lot of it is that Gygax liked using a lot of high wordy stuff just to It's like, oh,
They
well,
both,
look at which. Don't get me wrong. I remember I
a
grew
lot of
up on it,
people,
and I was, but a lot of it was, advanced was, well, this is what we're going to do, and if you read the white box, which I have, part of why Holmes did with the BX is he said, hey, you've made this where the person has to memorize everything. Let's bring it down so people can have a lower barrier of entry. It doesn't mean they can't get higher up, but it's also like if I suddenly went over and said, hey, you know what? I'm going to teach you calculus right now. You're like, I need to learn how to divide. You're like, yes, but you're going to learn calculus. You're like, well, hold on here. You have to get up to a
I
level.
was 12 and I managed to muddle my way through the DMG and run games for 40-year-olds at the time of 14. So I don't know, man. Either
Well, and a lot
I
of us don't. A lot of us still don't play right. I mean, if you actually look at like what is weapon speed, most people don't play with weapon speed, but weapon speed only comes up in one case. Weapon speed only matters if you tie for initiative. And then here's the other part. Again, we're just going by the rules, which, parse it out. And, we're the same way as we get older. As we get older, we're like, I don't want to learn the most complex systems. When I was young, I loved to
well,
learn all the
it's
complex
really
systems.
I can really sum it up real simply.
Yeah.
Uh, since Weapon Speed came out, precisely almost zero games that have come out after that borrowed that rule because it was just too cumbersome and clunky. And they all made the same decision to omit weapon speed and versus armor from almost every game. There are a few exceptions that do use those two mechanics, but for the most part, those got shit canned along the way. Uh,
When do you use weapon speed? Only if you tie on initiative.
and yet, a lot of people didn't know that and used it for every combat. A lot of people used, weapon versus armor all the time, but by the time third edition came out, from what I understand, and every other game that I've ever come across, none of them bother with that, or they simplified it down to, blunt, piercing, slashing.
Which is what I prefer myself.
It
Um,
makes more sense, because, uh, you know, that's what all weapons could be classified or broken down to one of the, and some of them could do multiple, you know,
right.
you could smash or you could slash or you could poke or you could slice with the same weapon. And if you chose and tell the DM, I'm poking him, okay, well I look to the versus the pokey
Well,
kind
again,
of damage and see your possible bonus or negative to that. But
well,
those rules were so they were viewed as so cumbersome because of how much space they took on the page, as well as trying to figure it out and trying to memorize it or any of that. Um,
so and
that they
apparently
just got
Luke
left.
Gygax even said his father didn't use armor versus
Mhm.
because he said he did that mostly for his friends in his wargaming group that all wanted that stuff. But
Mhm.
but what I'm referring to in this case is, and this is where Gygax should come in, is Gygax should come back and rewritten a lot of stuff because AD&D assumed that you were playing with someone, and I know it's the same thing for 5e. People learn it from the dungeon master, and they follow what the dungeon master did. And then when you go
Mhm.
back and reread the rules, you're like, we've been playing it wrong all these years. Like I said, the weapon speed doesn't matter. Well, the other part is, when you get multiple attacks, this is what's interesting, which we don't look at. And I know um, Sean from the Mage's Musings actually
Mhm.
brought this up. If a fighter gets 2 attacks per round, who attacks first? So if I'm fighting, let's assume I'm fighting a manticore. I'm fighting a manticore, and we roll initiative. But my fighter has 2 attacks, and the manticore has his attack. Who attacks first?
I would assume the fighter gets one attack, Manicore gets his attack, then the fighter goes again.
Correct. But it doesn't matter what the initiative is. It's only if you have the same ability for tying. So, but whenever we're rolling for initiative, it's like, well, guess what? If you're fighting, this is where it comes in the fighter. The fighter attacks first because he has multi attacks. It's only if he's fighting another fighter with similar aspects do you start looking at initiative to see which one attacks first in that grouping. And then if they're tied, then you look at what their weapon speed is. And if their weapon speed is tied, well, I'm sorry. if the weapon speed is half of what, if they have the same initiative, if it's half, then one of them gets to attack twice, and what versus the other. It's and I, when you look at it, it's like that's actually kind of complicated. And Gygax did, but almost I haven't ever played that way, and it's because most people said, "Hey, this is what we do. We roll initiative, and then you." And I understand something. Everyone attack. You get all your attacks in the same round. At the same moment.
Well, yeah, because it streamlines the game so that it doesn't become a slog like so many other combat oriented games where you're
Well, what it
spending
was.
the majority of the session trying to go back and forth between all the different people's precise moment when they attack. I freaking
Well,
hate it.
what they're supposed to
Just
do
get
is
it
they're
on with.
supposed to use a caller, and the caller tells you what everyone does in the group.
Yeah, and everybody hated playing that way because it delegated them to. They could literally call their game in from on the phone.
Yeah,
If I don't need to be here because Joe's the caller, I don't even need to be here. I can just call you on the phone and tell you what I do, and you can tell me if I'm successful.
I,
It literally took away a lot of people's enthusiasm to be at the table.
I'm not
You
disagreeing
know,
with you, but I understand where the caller comes in when you start playing with large groups. Um,
sure, sure.
and,
Uh,
and it's like, hey guys, you do, you figure out what you're going to do, and then everyone submit it, and it's like, hey, which to me is like everyone write it on a piece of paper, or the caller will write everything down and hand it to me, and then we will go down by action. And I'm not
yeah, but that takes something away from the social activity and turns it
well.
into a competition.
Well, my point being is that the caller is the one that says, they say, well, I'm going to cast a magic missile. Okay, which goblin? Goblin number 4. Okay, so everyone writes it down, and the DM goes through and goes, all right, click, click, click. And he just, he can move through the combats fairly quickly. And to be fair, my friend complains about this, which under 5e is when the player literally zones out in the middle of his round, and then he comes back. He's like, "Okay, what did you do?" And the guy goes, Let me just figure out what spell I'm going to cast." Like, you've had 5 minutes to figure out what spell you're going to cast. And
Yeah, well, that's a a whole bunch of other issues coming into
I, I,
play, right?
I'm not saying it isn't. We're just saying for the games. I think all too often, this is what it comes down to: is we play the game we want to play, but I don't ever claim to play 100% raw. I said, hey, this is what we're going to do, and we're going to change some of it. But I agree with you. It's the way that we're playing is the way I played since I was a little kid. But that's not technically the way it's supposed to be played um, by the rules. And again, but that's why every game of D&D was unique unto itself when you went into the place. And we had kind of common rules, but let's be honest. You went in there and it's like, well, I don't like this. I'm going to change this up. Okay, that's fine. Well, I'm going to do this. And some were stingy and some wanted, the Monty Hall and, just like,
Hmm.
okay, play. And some of us, I don't know how you were, some of us became forever DMs because we hated the way the other DMs DM'd.
Well, for a large portion, it was just no one else would do it, and many a game I was in, I knew the game better than them, and they resented that, and
See,
so
and you were playing with older players. Most people I played with the same, and most of us were doing round robin. Um, I like this game, so I'm gonna run this. It's like, well, whoever owned the core rule book usually was the DM for that game. Uh, and
that is a very fair rule because I'm not loaning my books out to anybody. Sorry.
well, what I mean
Uh,
by this is I didn't always buy the books because I didn't necessarily want it, but your friend did it. Um, I mean, I I like the idea of Roll Master, but I would never play it without it. But I wouldn't play it without a VTT because it would take too long. Um,
yeah.
those are just that, and I'm not even against it. It's like, okay, that's cool. If there's a VTT, guess what? You attack, it's looking up all the charts for you. But if I have to flip it back and forth with all the damn charts, I'm killing somebody. It's it's like, well, okay, you have. this weapon, which does this, and then this does this, and it's this kind of armor on this location. Let's roll for a hit location. Oh, and now it does this critical on this. Yeah. All right, guys, this is what we're going to do. Like I said, for the BTT, then I'm excited to have the Rollmaster Unified on Foundry. It's a fantastic. It works out really well. It's one that I wouldn't mind running, but I would only run it on the VTT. And when I say VTT, even if I played on person, what I would do is I would just put it up on the board and say, okay, guys, tell me what you're going to do. And, you do this on here. Not that I'm against, but, it's like I need an assistant. That's what it comes to. Well,
yeah.
Either you get your virtual assistant, which is the computer running in the background, or you need a physical one.
I've only run one game where I had a co-DM, and it was because I bit off more than I could chew, and I'll never do that again because it's not meant to be done that way. It just isn't. So hey, a couple of the questions we always go through on the Appendix N Book Club. Would you recommend this to anybody starting out playing D&D or a gamer?
I probably wouldn't. I would recommend this one. I would say go to one of the other. I would probably say go to Theseus and Jason and the Argonauts and pick one of those two stories. Just because there's other mythology that I think is better done for what the kind of game that you want to play.
Especially if you're going to play like a Swords and Sandals.
Yes.
I agree. This is there's it should be required reading at some point in everybody's life for reasons I can't even articulate what I think precisely those reasons are. I'm going to have to keep mulling it over. Every decade or so, I come back to the story and read it because you're supposed to be a well-read individual should know this story. Is there anything you would take from it though, and try to incorporate into one of your games if you were running some sort of fantasy RPG?
I think that I would use a doppelganger style character, which is what Enkidu was. If the players start acting inappropriately.
Really, I just pictured him as like Bigfoot.
Well, no. You're saying Bigfoot, but what I'm referring to is the fact that Enkidu was created as a balance towards Gilgamesh at the beginning of the story when he was going around. That's what I'm referring to. Is like, hey, guess what? You have acted, in against the gods or something like that. And so I would probably do curses as one, which leaves sometimes your henchmen, and then the other part I would do is to say, hey, this is what's coming in. I also like the fact, and we've talked about this before, even though in Greek myths they do have resurrection. This is one of those when you talk about there is no resurrection. Your whole point is to get powerful enough that the legacy or the care or your, and I think that was the end of the book, is it's the legacy of the story that you left behind, the kingdom that you have built, and the family you have sired. That is the legacy of your character, not how high level of a character you was.
And I think a lot of the great mythologies try to teach that same lesson. That's part of the overall, bigger message, or sublime messages that, the closest you're going to get to these other legends is creating your own legend and legacy that people will continue to talk about. If you're forgotten, you aren't, you haven't divine ascended. That's why I laugh at all the pagans and things like that. Well, I worship Thor. You're a freaking retard. You understand that the religion of Thor worship died a long time ago. If Thor was ever a real god, if he was, he died hundreds and hundreds of years ago, and all we got left of him is Thor's Day.
Well, I mean, for a lot of
Right?
things, I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to say the problem that I have is a lot of the Wiccans and stuff. When you actually look at it, is they aren't trying to worship the old gods. They're trying to worship the gods that they read under fantasy literature from the 1950s. That's what I'm referring to. Is you're not reading the the Norse sagas where they're saying, "Hey, this is what was going on." What you're reading is the stuff from the I hate to say it, it's like the deities and demigods. You're reading the deities and demigods and pulling that as your basis for your work.
Right. Well, because it's really simple. When Christianity defeated all the Norse religion type stuff, right? Even if Thor was a real god, he starved to death from lack of worshippers for the next 1,000 years and died.
And see,
Whatever
I'm not
death
even
a
saying
god
that.
can die,
All
there's
I'm
no
saying is,
followers. There's no worshippers. There's not enough to jumpstart a freaking, a pacer,
well, again,
or a
my point
gremlin.
is that they're LARPing the religion. They aren't
Hmm.
actually because, again, whether it's Greeks and stuff like this, there's a lot more into it, which means you have to really delve into the understanding of what's going on. And I was listening, and you were talking about, well, the god seems so small, and then I was listening to one part where they were talking about Mount Etna and how at one point Athena basically threw an island on top of him, you know, for typhoon, and you're just like, all right, you have an epic level of aspects to
That's
it. That,
that's what we should strive for in our fantasy stories, is to make them more than just a background thing, a helper, when they need it, and arbitrated on the whim of a die, not like your god's actually paying attention and you've been screwing up, so he says, no, my son, you cannot have this spell today until you do penance for that thing, and then point out the thing that they did wrong that they didn't realize they did wrong, so that they then won't maybe do that again,
well, the
right?
other part is, and you're saying what I
I
take
mean,
from it, which is certain monsters are protected, and to attack them angers the gods.
there could be that too, yeah.
The Humbaba, which he pled for mercy, and you guys decided to kill him anyway, so he cursed you. And they're like, "Well, I'm going to cast remove curse." I'm like, it doesn't work that way. It's
Hmm.
this is it's more than just that, and it's like, okay. And I think sometimes that's the feeling I get, is it's just like, well, it's a mechanical way of just defeating this. I said, no, the point is you're going to be cursed. You will be alone. I'm going to watch it. So the only person that will remember you, Enkidu, is your friend. And your friend is going to, and maybe the players can find a way of reversing it. There's always a story. But guess what? You have to go on another epic quest to prevent the
Hmm.
death because you guys acted inappropriately in the first place. Or, how
Which,
many.
I mean, if you think about it, that's why, um, kind of why clerics or priests, at least,
Yeah.
are in the game to begin with, because so many of the great epics, stories like this are heavily tied to the worship of this god or that pantheon or what have you, because of the interaction that the priest would have
So,
by
I mean,
being literally a priest of this god or pantheon. That's their job, and doing the bidding of said deities is way more important than the player characters going off to explore this dungeon in hopes of killing monsters and taking their stuff.
well, I mean, that's more of a sword and sandals aspect. If you're going to be using a lot of the mythology, I mean, I was,
Well, yeah, but I mean
yeah.
that's because when you got into the Middle Ages, the world was ruled by one god, and all that other stuff went to the wayside.
Well, no,
And you
no. What I'm
can't
saying
do
is,
that in
but
modern D&D, because no one wants to run, priests of Jesus Christ in their D&D game.
well, part of it also comes down to is, when we say sword and sandals, it's the stuff that we read from Pulp Fictions. That's what
Mhm.
it comes down to. Is, hey, we're doing this. It's not that the
Mhm.
gods weren't there; they just were not. They were of a much lighter touch than of the Greek mythology. If you, I was reading.
Because every pulp writer, when it came to gods, couldn't write come up with
I'm going to
enough
disagree with
about.
that. The problem I think really comes down to is you start removing agency from your main characters in a story.
Mhm.
And the other
But,
part is,
that's what mythology was. Those guys, they could try to rebel against the gods, but every time it failed.
yeah, I mean, fine, you did that with Elric, and that was about
Mhm.
it. Um, we all knew that Elric at some point was going to die. you know,
Yeah, Elric did everything he was supposed to do, whether he
and
liked it or not.
But
And that's the. I mean, you got to realize that's the difference between literature and our role playing games.
well,
Uh,
well, but I'm saying,
they're very similar, but there's such a great divide between the two that it's not really a fair comparison.
well, I mean, if you start looking at this, and we're gonna, I'm gonna use the Iliad, which was, the very beginning part, which is, they they they're complaining about the priest of Apollo who wanted to get his daughter back and brought a bunch of gold, and they rebuffed him. They said, no, she's going to stay as my consort because she's a spoil of war. And he's like, here, I'm giving you more treasure than she's worth. Can I have my daughter back? And he goes, no. And so what does the priest do? Great Apollo, can you smite down the Greeks the Achaeans who will not give my daughter back? And so
Mhm.
there, which, and there are different ways, literally, it could be that they were dying from disease or, just randomly dying off or some things like that. But they're like, okay, the gods are angry. And so at the end, it's really coming down to, and then they go over and they find the soothsayer effectively. And he says, well, what I have to say, no one's going to like. And Achilles like, well, I will defend you no matter what you do. And he tells Agamemnon well, the Apollo is striking down our soldiers because you didn't give the woman back. And he's like, well, she's a spoil of war. Like, you could have taken the treasure, which was far more. And then, of course, he gets aggravated about that. And it's like,
Mhm.
all right. And then, what starts happening in this case is he gets mad because Achilles. So then he takes Achilles' woman that he gave her. He gave Achilles and said, okay, you can have this woman. And he says, well, you know what? For me giving up the priest's daughter, I'm going to take Achilles' woman. And Achilles is like, oh, he was pissed off at that one. And then he acts like a petulant child. But he storms off and says, well, screw it. You guys can fight amongst yourselves. Good luck. I'm pulling my troops back. We aren't going to fight for you because you have dishonored me. And, and what is it saying? And Zeus, put these two against each other. And I was listening to some of them where, Aphrodite, which we don't do with our players because it feels just too Deus ex machina. Where Menelaus is fighting with Paris, and he grabs him by the helm, and is about ready to kill him, and the strap breaks, and then Athena comes down, not Athena, Aphrodite comes down, puts a fog so they can't see him, and then lifts him up and puts him in his bed. it's like, well, would we do that with our players? No. But that's
No,
but that
I mean maybe you pull that off when they've achieved a certain sort of status or level.
sure.
But again, that's with the whole idea of having to start out at first or zero level, which to me is getting so very very boring. The older I get, it's like I'm so weary of having to play people that if they were real life characters, if they were real, I could kick their ass with one hand tied behind my back. Okay, and I'm
Well,
a
see,
60-year-old out of shape fuck that shouldn't be able to do that. You know,
well, but
they
but
should
see, the
be
problem is
heroes.
that
Damn it!
people look at first level and ignore the fact that hit points and levels are supposed to represent both status and divine. Again, this is where some of it comes into it. It's like,
Not every game. Not every game. CNC does not have that attitude. Dragon Slayer certainly doesn't. Dragon Slayer literally says, "You're just Joe Schmo off the street."
I'm not
Literally.
talking about Dragon Slayer. We're talking AD&D. Saying AD&D, you're
Well,
supposed to
I
be
play
one.
other games besides AD&D. That's what
Well,
I'm
yeah,
saying.
but if we're going to talk AD&D at first level,
Then
it's supposed to.
you're absolutely right. But it's not. It's not in the top 100 games that are being played right now when it comes to RPGs worldwide. It's not in the top 25.
Well, yeah, first edition is not. Neither is Dragon Slayer. Um,
No,
I mean,
but they're all games I am actively playing in, as well as Castles and Crusade and Shadow Dark. And all of them except AD&D, which I'm running, not playing. You start out as nobodies, and
Well, see,
I don't know,
well,
just
here's my view on this. Is I agree with you. Is I've played first level so many times. Fine, I'll play first level. I don't like first level. I'm like, why don't you just start us off at third? Third is you're actually. I mean, you have enough hit points to survive most things. I'm saying you can die instantly. It doesn't mean that you can't get overwhelmed by hobgoblins. But the same point is, hobgoblins are, they're lesser foes to you. You can take them on. Um, you aren't just like, oh, should I fight this? I think that first, the first few levels are fine for new players who don't understand the game. It's like, hey, I'm trying to teach you how to survive when you get up to higher levels. But like you said, we've been playing with those. Start me off at third. Start me off at fifth. The other point is, and you've seen this too, which is if you've never played D&D and you get a magic user or a cleric, if I start you at a higher level, you shut down because of analysis paralysis, because you don't know all the spells, you don't know what you're doing, you're not familiar with it,
mhm.
you don't know what you can cast. That to me, playing a fifth level fighter is not hard in most cases.
No.
However, playing fifth level magic user or a fifth level cleric, you can get overwhelmed pretty quickly if you're not familiar with
Oh
what
yeah,
they.
because it's just the sheer number of possible options that are there um, for the spellcasters. Absolutely, druid, cleric, what have you, warlock. It doesn't matter. There's hundreds of spells, depending on what level
Yeah,
you're able to cast up to have to go through. And again, it's we're old hat at this, but I've been thinking about it. It's like like if I play a game of Traveler, right?
right.
And I create a character, right? He's a 35-year-old veteran starship captain, blah blah blah. If I turned him into a D&D character, I just made him up. I just literally just finished rolling him up, mustering out. He's 35 years old, and the D&D the DM says, "Oh, guess what? You landed on Thieves World, right? But it's a
Right.
D&D. That's the thing you could do. I guarantee you, he's not a first level character. You know what
I
I
didn't
mean?
say that he was. I said from my standpoint is if you know what you're doing and you've been playing long enough, then to me, why are you starting them off at first level? Start them off
Well,
at
no, but
third.
what I was trying to get at is that like sci-fi games, um, you almost never start out as the 16 or 18-year-old nobody. You know what I mean? You
Right.
To survive in a sci-fi game, you kind of have to have like kind of graduated college. You know what I
Well,
mean?
I'm
I
just
mean,
saying.
maybe not. You could play the Luke, sure, but you could just as easily go into the game going, "Well, I'm playing Obi-Wan, and I've been around the galaxy a few hundred times, and I've done all this shit, you know." And if I'm going to now get converted into a D&D game for some weird reason, there ain't no way you're making me fucking first level.
Well, yeah. If you're playing any game, you should be deciding what level you're going to start off with. And if you're playing with new characters, then, and for me,
What's up, Alfred?
that's where you come into it. It's like, what levels are we going in? But I think that, where are you going to start off at? And it's like, okay. And this is one of the reasons I
I could
like, well, this is one of the
literally,
reasons I like Dark Sun. Dark Sun started you off at third level.
mhm.
And you weren't doing this. And then Dark Sun had the assumption that at some point, and they even mentioned this, you don't, all too often for D&D and things, well, you're ninth level, no one knows your name. And Dark Sun's like, no, we expect you as you get to higher level to, everyone knows your name. You don't hide in the shadows by getting up these higher levels. You aren't this,
No. Dark Sun was uh, very adamant about that. With levels comes responsibility and fame and fortune and recognition.
well, and
Because I've been in 100 D&D games where I was 7, 8 light level and nobody knew who the hell I was and treated me like I was the piss boy. And I'm like,
yeah, well, if you look at it, is just going by this, it's what 2 to the 7th power. So it's supposed to be you're one in what is it 50,000 if you're 7th level. Um, people forget about it. It's like 1 in 50,000. Okay, well, what happens when you're 10th level? Now
mhm.
you're almost one in well, it's 1 in maybe a little bit less, but regardless, you're still 1 in 10,000. And once you get to 10th level, it's like 1 in 100,000. And by the
Mhm.
time you're at, um, if you're 20th level, then it's 1 in 100 million. And you're like, okay,
Which was never even remotely accurate because I can't tell you how many D&D worlds I was a player in where every NPC the GM had was way higher level than you, no matter who you were. It was like
and
it was always one upsman. The GM didn't want you killing his NPCs, so they were better.
yeah, but again, we're talking about the
Every
way that
Without
it's
fail,
supposed to
every
be
game I
done.
ever played in, that's the way it was.
Well, look,
As
and
a
that's
GM myself, that's not the case because I
well,
know
that's
better.
well, that's the yeah. But again, when we were young, we did all sorts of stuff, and it's like, no, you're supposed to do some things.
No, no, I mean even literally in a game I played a year ago.
This
And these were GMs that were in their 40s and 50s as well. Um,
well, see,
that, that, that
this is why I like Axe. It says this is how many people you have of this level. If you're 14th level, which is the highest level you can get to, there's like one in, basically you're ruling an empire, and there might be 5 or 6 empires in the entire world. You're like, okay,
but you can easily justify when your character's 10th level, you are rubbing elbows with lots of high level characters.
yes, yeah, yeah, well, yeah. I'm not saying that you don't, but the point being is at that point you're like, oh, okay. But I
Because
don't
we
think it
know
is.
most GMs
Yeah,
do not want to be subservient to the players with every NPC. You know what I
well,
mean? Even the lowly shopkeeper who you know by the book should be a 4 hit point nobody has power over you as the player because it's run by the GM.
and see, I don't like that. That's why I like having, and this is
But
why I
that
said
is the
accept.
predominant mentality in the hobby. Always has been.
I'm not saying it isn't the predominant mentality. The problem I have all too often is exactly that kind of thing. It's like, look, not everyone has to be super high level. Um,
Not
you
everybody
know,
should be in
exactly.
D&D in certain games. Other games though, there have been plenty of games like Palladium where everybody's leveled and you never know what you're going to bump into, and that's why you're nice and polite to everybody unless otherwise, you know, required. You bump into a shopkeeper, you bump into the paper boy. That might be a 12th level paper boy. Sure, he's only got 12 hit points, but he's still a 12th level paper boy. He's got some connections. He knows guys, and you don't give me $2. He's going to make a phone call. The next thing you know, you're going to get a ticket on your car in the morning because you parked on the street and it was Wednesday, and normally the street sweeper goes by your car and just lets it slide, but you know, not
I
this
and
time.
yeah, well, I mean, but you can do that with any game. It's the whole point. Is that my whole thing really is, and this is why I like some things that are explicit in games, the way things are
Mhm.
supposed to be versus the way that people run them.
They end up, yeah, because it's
Completely
weird
different.
how like no matter what game you're playing these days, people carry over certain things that they're just never going to let go. It doesn't matter what it says in the book. It's going to be this way because that's the way. And I'm probably the same way with a bunch of stuff. That's the way they're going to run it. Doesn't matter what game they're playing. They're going to have those rules that are just like permanently engraved in the Ten Commandments tablet in their head. And they would just swear up and down. Oh, I'm sure it's a rule in this game. No, no, Grandpa, that's a rule in a game from 30 years ago, and you haven't been playing that game, in 25 years. So, get
Well,
with the program.
that was one thing that pissed me off about second edition AD&D. You got rid of the 0 level characters, which were supposed to be your just average peasants, and
Mhm.
then you also, and I'm going to use this because this was an actual module, which was one of their super module series. We have a bunch of ninth level fighters then come at you, and I went, why do you have a bunch of lords appear? To me, if you're going to get a bunch of lords, it's going to be like the Pelennor Fields. All the lords have been summoned, and everyone's getting together. It's going to be a massive war. Why would they go alone out there? It makes no sense to me.
Mhm.
That's where I always felt that something was missing from that, and that's why I like Axe. Axe
Well,
explicitly
even
says
the
that.
village of Hamlet was like that. Every NPC in that thing is like higher level than the players coming into it.
Well,
Almost
and
all
that
the modules are like that.
well, I'm not saying all the modules are. Usually, I've seen
A
some of them
lot
where
of.
I saw some where they were like 3 named NPCs where they were like retired adventurers up to 4th level or so. I'm
Mhm.
like, okay, fine. You're a hero at 4th level. I can understand that. That hey, guess what? I've done my adventuring time. I'm going to go and open a bar. I understand that aspect. I do, but I agree with you. Is when you start making it so everyone is out there and no one knows your name, or you're like the secret. That it makes no sense in some instances, not all instances, but there should always be stories. I don't know
Mhm.
if you want to have fun. Do you like silly kung fu films?
Sure, every once in a while.
Have you watched Kung Fu Hustle?
No, I have not.
So anyway, there's this part where they're all coming in and they're like, oh, the X gang's coming in, and they suddenly find out there are like 4 high level martial artists in there, and they're saying, oh my god, it it's kind of, but they all were like, well, they were all hiding and things like that. It's just like, hey, we didn't want to be. You have some of that, but not everyone's that way. And I really do feel that the players should, if you're supposed to be 1st level, you're a veteran. It's kind of like, I'll step aside for you because you can probably kick my 0 level ass. But I'm still, but if I got a bunch of 0 levels in the mob, they would probably take you down. Okay, fine.
Mhm.
By the
Mhm.
time you're at, let's assume that you're at 5th level, you are, and this is the other problem I have, which is why I like the cleave, and that's why I'm going to use axe in this case. This is one of the reasons I get so frustrated, is you're getting up to 5th or 6th level, and I know you don't like goblins and stuff, but for me is I would love to see it if, like, guess what, you guys are like 6th level, you're facing off against 40 goblins. The goblins don't know you're 6th level. They're like,
Mhm.
put down your stuff. You're like, no, we're not. Like, oh really? You know this is a losing proposition. Like, all right, game on, and all of a sudden your rangers cleaving through 6 of them at a time, and they're like,
Mhm.
oh my god, what are we doing? And
Mhm.
sometimes I think
There,
that,
there are many times that the players should
yeah,
just walk through the combat.
and yeah,
That's. I mean, it's amazing how I have never ever. Let me rephrase that.
sure.
In the last 6 years that I've been playing online, not once has that ever happened.
I
Every battle, every single battle, has got to be
Balance are
barely
very challenging.
survive.
Yes. And I don't want that. I want sometimes the players to feel like they're badasses because they are. If you're 5th or 6th
Doesn't
level,
cost you anything. It's not like they were your kobolds that just got slaughtered.
well,
You
that was
know,
one of the things that when people
right?
talk
They're
about
just made
Tucker's,
up. Yeah. You guys just walk through an army of trolls, 10,000 of them, and you kick their asses. I don't care. It doesn't
well,
change anything. I
sometimes
mean,
it's
yeah,
like,
it makes you guys badasses, but it
you know,
doesn't, ruin the world or the game.
well,
It,
there are times that you want to do it, but I'm just saying for like, look,
Mhm.
sometimes when you're fighting the big monsters, that's great, but sometimes I want you to fight the low level monsters so you can realize that it's just not an ever escalating where, the challenge ring in 5e. Hey, guess what? We just put more hit points and things take longer to do for a battle, and it just feels the same every time. Now, if I start mixing up between goblins, and then you're like, okay, you're fighting the mighty goblin, or guess what? The goblins have brought out their 2 trolls, or I say trolls, we can say ogres, it's slightly different. But you brought out your 2 ogres. If you're 4th level, you were like cleaving through those goblins. Yeah, okay, they're causing a few problems. You know, you and your little halfling buddy, and then like, great, I got 2 ogres at it, and these guys can really hurt us. And now you're like, okay, this is a real fight. But then it allows you to say, okay, someone do something against the big guys, and we'll take out the little guys. The little guys are still going to ping us every so often. Yeah, okay,
Mhm.
fine. They need a natural 20 to hit us, but let's be honest. If you have 100 goblins, they're probably hitting 5 times around, at least something. So it's going to whittle you down. So you have to deal with them. And then that's the other part is, man, you're going, well, wizard, what do you have? Well, I got fireball. Oh, well, that will clear out about 60 goblins.
Mhm.
It's like, you know, it doesn't always have to be, okay, fine. Even if you
A
have a low level
slog?
fireball,
Yes, it does. Apparently, yes, it fucking does.
what does? Yeah, well, yeah.
It has to be a slog.
Yeah.
with 99% of the game masters I've met in the last 6 years. Every battle has to be, um, you made it out by the skin of your teeth, period. There is
I,
no other kind of victory.
I'm going to bring up another thing, which I was looking at. How many times have you had to talk to a specter or a white?
Me personally, in real life, only around the holidays, but in game, maybe two or three.
I mean, to me, a white is a great, especially if you're low level. If you and when I mean low level, first through third or so, and the white looks at you, and he starts asking, "Why have you invaded my tomb? What do you seek from here? What can you provide me?" And yeah, like, oh crap, do we have silver weapons? Maybe. Do we have a little holy water? Yeah, I don't think we can take out the white, or the white's going to be a tough fight. And here he is talking to us. Yes, he may hate us, but he may not actually want to kill us. So, come up with a
Oh
good
no, he
reason
wants
why
to
the white
eat you.
doesn't kill you. What's that?
He absolutely wants to eat you.
Well, you know, he's
I
aggravated at the world.
yeah, I would make that encounter something else if you want. If you're in the mood for role playing, a white to me is just is like a human shark.
Yes,
It just wants to eat you. That's it.
but
You know.
here's the point. Whites have intelligence. I think it's average
Mhm.
intelligence or something, and we don't play them. And I'm saying a lot of us do not. We do not play them as intelligent. We don't play them as they're going to talk to the player characters, which is what they should probably do all the times. They're not stupid. Why have you entered my tomb? If you do not tell me, and the same thing with mummies, we use them as the monster of the week, and they come in, and I'm going, but you know this. So many of the stuff we read in books, it's so cool when they go over, and it's the yeah, it's we go, hey, this would be actually kind of cool if they would talk. Um, if they have you know, all of a sudden they
Average
open.
intelligence.
But my point is, even with average intelligence, they can still talk. They're not. They're not
Yeah, 8 to
completely.
10.
Yeah,
They might talk. I just find that that life draining
yes.
also equates to life hunger.
I'm not. Well, to me, it could, but again, sometimes when I'm reading the white, is like,
I could see it if it's like the white is actually like that ancient king that was buried, and for whatever reason, you go into the tomb and there's the dead king wakes up, and he's a white,
right.
covered in his treasure, and like, why have you disturbed me,
Yes.
but
Well,
normally I picture them as like a step up from ghouls and ghasts, as a sort of semi pack hunter of the night looking for its next meal.
but my
You
point is that we could be doing different things for these monsters. Is if they're having intelligence, let's not, and they can talk. Let's actually use it that way. And you know,
know?
I'm not saying there are enough players that are like, I'm going to go and fight them. Well, okay, but
I think the problem is that, like lately, is most GMs are under the impression that nobody wants to role play, so I'm just going to give them some combat so they can kill some monsters, get some XP, because that's like the only way you get XP is through combat now, and then they can get a little treasure and feel like it was a good game, not realizing that if the DM did exactly what you just
yeah.
said, players would leave the game going, "Oh my god, that was so fucking weird. That never happens." Yeah, no shit,
Well,
because you've gotten lulled into the mediocre habit of kill the monster, take their stuff, smash in the next door.
and some of it is you can haggle with them if they're intelligent. You have come here, all right.
Yeah, we'll
You
give you
know,
the dwarf if you let us go.
you know if you can go get this from my treasure to release me from my undeath, then I will allow you to pass, or
Mhm.
something of that sort. I will.
Or give me the elf girl. I'll let you pass.
Well,
What?
I mean, I'm not saying there aren't certain times like that. It's if you suddenly look over and it's like, all right, and then you start realizing. But I think that we don't use just like for me, I know that vampires do 2 levels. They drain 2 levels. I would never. I always thought it was dumb. He touches you. I mean, yeah, but every book I've ever read is they have to suck your blood. At that point, I don't mind doing the 2 level drain. Um, that's what the
That was very good.
Which one? Oh, the
Modern audiences. Yeah, I'm not going to read that. It's too
yeah.
long.
Anyway,
It is very, very, very good though. Um,
but yeah, but why aren't you talking to some of these monsters? And that was what when we start reading this. This is why you were supposed to have reaction rolls. And the intelligent undead are supposed to be intelligent. They aren't just going to like come at.
yeah, and I don't know about you, but as a GM, some of the most fun we get to have is the NPCs. I mean, to me, honestly, that's it. That's the height
Yes,
of game mastering is getting to play the NPCs that you created randomly or on purpose, or the monsters, and getting to play, as the dragon, or as a demon lord, or as the evil wizard, or as the bugbear chief, or whatever. If it can talk and you get to play as it and not just go, it swings its tail and clobbers you for 3 points of damage.
right.
Any freaking dimwit can do that. But to
Well,
go and play the monster, and leave an impression to where, they're like, yeah, I'm not going to forget that session.
well, the other part is, and I don't mind doing too much about this, is okay. Are you going to deal with this? Are you going to talk to it? Are there ways of getting through? Maybe the white will tell you, this is, if he tells you some sob story and says, "I need you to do this." He doesn't have to like you. And then the other part is it says they shun bright light, so you can make them like the Morlocks in time, the
Mm-hmm.
time machine, like
Mm-hmm.
it's like,
Mm-hmm.
all right, that's
or
great.
the things in Descent, or
Yes.
various other stories, or
It might,
movies.
well, yeah, but you can do that, and then as long as you keep that light going, and if you don't have the continual light, it's like, well, I sure hope that we can keep them back with that lantern or torch.
Mm-hmm.
Um, those are to me all the things that we're missing from these games because there's plenty of them, and I did like this for Dark Sun. In Dark Sun, you can find some of the undead from the times before the Great Cataclysm, and they're underground, and they're stuck there, and they may want to talk to you, but you could find, as a DM,
Mm-hmm.
not that we always do a lore dump, but sometimes it's like, well, tell me about the old world. I am stuck here for 1,000 years, cursed never to leave. Um, and actually, that was one of my favorite modules. Is Pharaoh, the what was that what was that I3 or something like that?
It was one
Because
of the I series.
yeah, but he comes up and he sees the players and says the only way that I can go to the afterlife is you have to rob my tomb, and because I have sinned basically against my empire. Um, they said for my hubris, they told me the only way for me to pass is to do that. It's like, okay, great. Now how do we get into his damn tomb? And but I love that module because it had a lot of different monsters. It had different things going through. Um, yeah, we can do a zero session for MCC. I don't mind that this Saturday. I still need to set up the whole session one, but yep, we can set that up. I just have to do it on the day. I've got some of the map already done. I just need to put the monsters in.
Yeah, I remind me. I got to go look for my MCC books, um, and I'm gonna actually shut the show down in just a minute.
Sure.
But the last piece of thing, before we say adios to Gilgamesh for God knows how long, is to pick the next book. And it's your pick because I picked Gilgamesh. I don't know where the other folks who were going to join us, what happened. I left plenty of messages, and
I'm going to try
and,
keeping it relatively short, and so I think if we're going to talk about some of these things, um, let me figure out because I'd like to do maybe Theseus,
mhm.
that or yeah, I mean we could do Jason the
I
Argonaut.
kind of like to avoid the Odyssey because of the movie.
The problem I have is the Odyssey is a long book, and it's going to take 12 hours or so.
Mhm,
Same thing with like the Iliad. I'm trying to keep things 2 hours or less because
mhm.
then we can say, well, you know what? Let me think about this. Um, and if I need to, I'll cut it down even more and say, hey, guess what? We're going to go do this section for it. But I think Theseus was one of my favorite heroes because he did so much.
Well, I'm going to warn you, Robin Hood's coming up because he's as a youngster, he was like one of my first all time heroes. I mean, this was going back to kindergarten even.
Well, I think if we're going to do something like that, then we need to do like chapters 1 and 2, and then chapters 3 and 4, or something like that.
But I also want to,
But
when we have more people, I do also want to hit Charlemagne. That's a big one on my list. Um,
was it the Song of Roland? We're going to do some of them are fairly short, and some of them are pretty long.
yeah, I've got to find my book. I have a whole book on Charlemagne, but I don't know where the hell it is. But before I go, I'm going to show this off real quick. Oh, you know what this is?
No, you have to put it on the side. I can't
You
quite
can
see.
barely see it. Let me see if I can pull it out this way and show it off.
Okay. Oh yeah.
I wish I would have known it was Savage Lands when I got it, but you know what? It doesn't matter because I'm not reading it for the rules and mechanics. I'm reading it for the title Solomon Kane. But I also got the DM screen is in the slipcase,
Yes.
but because I forget who told me over on oh gosh, what's the channel's name? God, I feel really bad that I can't remember the name of the channel. Uh, our arbiters something or other. I think. What's up, Agile? Um, but it came with this because, like I said, it was on sale. Oh Jesus!
Oh, I know. Well, it comes to miniatures. If you brought it with that, you understand that I spent way too much on that specifically
Look, okay,
because.
look at the
Oh
size
yeah.
of this freaking thing.
You saw my 84 inches of games right from the Pantheon
This
from
is
Monolith also.
this is 100 minis plus 20 floor tiles.
Yes.
The final arbiter, yeah. Um, someone on the channel said, "Hey, Monolith's having a sale.
That was me.
Uh,
That was me.
what's it do?" And I ran over there as quick as I could get over there, and I swear to God, according to them, it was in the mail the very next freaking day. I'm like,
So
that's freaking amazing.
so for me, they were real quick. Like I ordered on the weekend and they shipped it on Tuesday, which I was like, that's pretty fast. Um, but then they kept forgetting things because I bought too much and they didn't want to ship more than one box. So I had to write to them. But yeah, it's a great deal, especially with I mean, give me just a second here. Yeah, you're talking about that, but I had the Pantheon.
Okay, thank you, Agile. Yeah, yeah.
I mean, not that anyone can see that, but
No, can't see shit. You don't have lights on, man. I don't
I
know
know.
what you
Give me a second.
freaking Warlock.
Hey Siri, turn on bedroom lights.
What's up, Agile?
Not that you can see these very well because I don't have that
Yeah,
edit.
dude, I think I've seen them before. I just got to,
And wait a
uh,
minute. This is
see what I
and then
started.
so for those three, and Atlas. These are pretty chunky.
Yeah, I didn't see those on the website as being part of any sale or even
Oh yeah.
available. Same with
I mean, no, for them, this was on the same sale as the. I think the sale's still going.
no. I went there this morning because I thought I had ordered the dice, but I didn't, and I'm glad I didn't because they were like $25 for a set of, a regular set of dice, just Solomon Kane colored. Shut up! I'm not paying $25. I can go get a set of metal dice for
I
that
know.
price. I was just like, even if they were on sale at half, it'd be $12.50. The last set of metal dice I got were $9.99, and they're here. I'll show you. They showed them off the other day. These are freaking awesome dice. Uh, dang it, that one keeps falling out. Black and brass, solid brass dice. It was
I
$10.
don't like metal dice, to be honest. I like the
I
like the.
I, I've decided to go along with my metal heart and my metal persona. I'm never buying any more dice that aren't metal. They're all going to be metal, and to hell with our dinner table.
Well, I like the transparent dice for some of that, but no, I mean, For
I
this
got
one
you cracked
had,
open.
what does this one has? This
The camera's
has
been weird all night, hasn't it, folks? I
what,
feel like
37?
one of those special effects ghosts in modern horror movies.
That has 37, and this one has 86 miniatures in it.
The
So,
Solomon came to 100 even miniatures and 20 tiles. I'm not even opening it. I'm not even going to cut the plastic wrap off it because I know I'll just get sucked in and like, oh, I want to paint these. I'm so tired of painting pumpkins and vampires, which I haven't even started yet because that's maybe it'll tie into September, October, November season. But
well, I mean, I want to, again, when you talk about the minis, and I think that these are the Greek ones, because they came out first, are not quite as good as the Egyptian ones. But
I
man,
bet the Egyptian ones are pretty neat.
yeah, those are. And I'm probably going to pick one. I'll have to figure out what story I want that's not too long, because I only want to make about 2 hours. So I think that's enough time talking when we get off of everything and everyone doesn't feel that way. But yeah, I mean, the minis are a bit smaller for these, but of course,
Well,
you know,
they're what 28s. Well, that's not
I,
bad. That's not bad.
these aren't bad, but I mean, compared to the stuff that I get in the later stuff, because these were the first, this was the first one of the game. Um,
That's not bad for a giant snake.
yeah, but wait a minute. That one's not that bad for a giant snake, but let me get the. When you start getting the later ones, and this is the Ragnarok ones, which they start making them a lot bigger. Now you're starting to get. Oops, darn it. Now you start getting much larger miniatures for that.
Mhm.
The giant snake, which I unfortunately have him all hooked up in here, so I'll have to
Hmm.
remove it. But but these are, yeah. There's probably a couple. They're pre-assembled, so I can actually put them on the board, which is nice. I don't have to mess with them.
Are they plastic or resin?
These are all plastic because they're injection molded. But
Okay.
you know, I, whenever you print off 20,000 copies, it makes sense to make them out of
Plastic.
plastic. Yeah, resins if you're doing small batches.
Hmm. Yeah. I'm kind of over 3D printed stuff.
3D
Uh,
print should be to me left for terrain, unless it's like the resin stuff, that like the high quality resin.
hmm hmm and I've had mixed luck with both, but it's just I the I've never had like plastic minis like that or whatever, Kickstarters or board games and things like that. They're always um, they're always perfect. You know what I mean? There's no defects. The worst you've got is mold lines, um, or they're made out of a rubbery plastic that might wilt.
So these are like I said, the Greek ones are a little bit softer plastic, but when I get into the Ragnarok ones, they're all hard plastic, but I still like the gods are twice as tall as regular minis, which makes them easy to identify. Um, it's so those are just some of the things that go in there, and the problem is I get sucked up in the minis just as much as anybody else. So
Take care, Alfred.
all right, wherever these go. Um, but yeah, I get sucked up into them as much as anybody else, and I would love to paint these. But what's nice about these is I can put them on the board immediately and not have to spend hours trying to assemble them. And that's really what I want with my son. Is like, hey, son, let's go do this. He's like, okay, let's go play. Um, and I really,
Well, and when you get to be like my age and you're retired and shit, and
yeah,
you finally decide to start painting them all,
yes.
I will be looking down uh, from heaven, going, "You lucky bastard."
Well,
Or I'll be calling you up on the phone. What are you doing? We got a game. Because I'll
Well,
finally
part of
be.
it will come down to probably this, which is, hey guys, let's all get together. I have 100 minis to paint. Here, you paint this color and this color, and we're just gonna, one person primes, one person does the, hey, you do all the metal, you do all of this, you do all of that. I'm like, oh, okay.
I miss actual miniature painting sessions with the guys. Just bring your shit over. We're just gonna paint. All right, cool.
That's the way it should be, though. I mean,
I agree.
it's unless you really don't like what someone's doing with the painting, that's about it. But
I was painting this little bastard while we were talking.
yeah, but the other part is, and we're talking regardless of which group you do it with, but I really do like having, if you're putting up large armies, if I have to do 30 of the same characters or whatever to get 3 units, God, it's not that much fun. The monsters are the fun ones to paint. The terrain is the fun stuff to paint.
I know, but we got to suffer for our art.
That's right. We all have to suffer because other people are screwing us now.
Mm-hmm. But the wife, she just beckoned me with candy, and I got to go do people stuff.
That sounds good. You take care.
I'll
put up in there what we're looking at, but I'm probably going to,
because I'm not even going to put up the date until you tell me what book you want to. Sure. And I'll go reprimand the slackers who didn't make it tonight.
Yeah, those darn Irish people, they never show up. No,
I love hanging out with Dark Knight. He's a great talker.
Teasing
I don't know what happened, and I don't know who else kind of tentatively committed, but we're gonna do this because I want to read some of the stuff that matters and should be as I got a couple ideas that I'm gonna pull from this story for my upcoming games.
Yeah,
but I will see you Saturday. If I don't see you tomorrow morning.
Good. Yeah, we'll do Saturday, and then we'll talk about MCC. Make sure that everyone can log in, and then I will put up a PDF of 50 character sheets, and you pick the 2 character sheets you each want.
Sounds good.
And then once you guys make it to the funnel, then if you want a different character, then we'll just roll them up, and that's fine by me. So
okay.
I don't want people to feel like they're stuck with it, but I do like the funnel initially, just because I think it's a cool funnel. It's a cool adventure. Hey, people die left and right, and then after that, once we become first level, then hopefully it's a lot less likely to die.
All right, folks. I will see you guys tomorrow morning. I think, unless I get busy with the thing that I'm got to do right now. Otherwise, I'll see you tomorrow, anyways, for second breakfast. What's up, nerdy? Yeah, you only realize you have arthritis in your hands and your eyes are shut. And if you don't get 2 p.m. nap, you're useless the rest of the afternoon. None of those things are true except the nap part, nerdy. I'll see you guys later.